The Duchess didn't scream when she found them. That would have been expected. Natural, even. But Elara Whitcombe had learned long ago that screaming changed nothing in the stone halls of Halcrest Manor. So when she pushed open the door to her own private chamber, the one room that was supposed to be hers alone, and saw her husband tangled in silk sheets with a woman whose laughter she recognized from countless dinner parties, she simply stood there, frozen, a porcelain figure finally cracking from the inside out. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of cold shoulders and colder beds, and now this. But here's what Rowan didn't know as he scrambled to cover himself, as his mistress gasped and clutched expensive fabric to her chest. Elara was already carrying his child, and that changed absolutely everything. If you want to see how far a desperate woman will go when she has nothing left to lose, and how a powerful man learns that some things can't be owned, stick with me until the end. Drop a like and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The celebration downstairs was still going. Elara could hear it. The music, the laughter, the crystal glasses clinking in toast to prosperity and legacy. All of it might as well have been happening in another country. She stood in the doorway of her chamber for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. Time did strange things when your world collapsed. Elara, Rowan's voice, sharp, not apologetic, annoyed, as if she'd interrupted something important. "What are you doing up here?" The woman in the bed, Lady Catherine Verne, Elara's mind supplied helpfully, had the decency to look uncomfortable. She pulled the sheets higher, her face flushed. Whether from embarrassment or the previous activity, Elara couldn't tell, didn't care. "I asked you a question." Rowan was standing now, pulling on his trousers with movements that suggested this wasn't the first time he'd had to dress quickly. Probably wasn't even the 10th. Elara's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her sides, willing them still. "I came to get my mother's necklace for the portrait sitting tomorrow. At this hour? The party gave me a headache." The words came out flat, dead. She barely recognized her own voice. Rowan's jaw tightened. He dismissed Catherine with a flick of his hand, actually flicked his hand like she was a servant, and the woman scrambled to gather her things. She didn't meet Elara's eyes as she fled past her into the corridor, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and shame. When they were alone, Rowan didn't apologize. Of course he didn't. "You're being dramatic," he said instead, buttoning his shirt with steady fingers. "This doesn't concern you." "It was my bedroom. It's my estate. Every room in it belongs to me." He stepped closer, and Elara fought the urge to back away. She'd learned early in their marriage that backing away only made him push harder. "Including you, in case you've forgotten." There it was, the truth he'd never bothered hiding, not really. She wasn't his wife, she was his property, a well-bred mare to produce heirs and look appropriate at social functions. Elara's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. Still flat, no sign yet of the secret growing inside her. She'd only confirmed it 3 days ago with the family physician, and she hadn't told Rowan yet. Had been planning to tell him tonight, actually, during the party. Thought maybe it would change things between them. How stupidly naive. "I want my own chambers," she heard herself say. "Separate from yours, permanently." Rowan laughed, actually laughed, like she'd told a particularly amusing joke. "Absolutely not. What would people think?" "I don't care what people think." "Well, I do. The Halcrest name means something, Elara. We maintain appearances. That's how this works." "This?" She gestured between them, her voice finally rising. "What is this, exactly? Because it certainly isn't a marriage." "It's exactly a marriage, a proper one. Strategic. You bring connections. I provide status and security. We produce heirs. Everything else is what? Irrelevant?" The words tasted bitter. "I'm irrelevant?" Rowan's expression shifted, and for just a moment she saw something that might have been guilt. But it vanished so quickly she couldn't be sure it was ever there. "You're being hysterical," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Go back downstairs, smile, play your role. We'll discuss this later when you're calm." "I am calm." "You're anything but." He moved past her toward the door, pausing only to add, "And fix your face before you return to the party. You look like you've been crying." She hadn't been crying. That was the strangest part. She felt like she should be crying. Any normal woman would be. But her eyes were bone dry. Maybe she'd run out of tears months ago. Elara didn't return to the party. She sat in her violated chamber, on the bed that still smelled like her husband's cologne and another woman's perfume, and stared at nothing. The necklace, her mother's necklace, lay in its velvet box on the vanity. She'd actually come for it. That part hadn't been a lie. The portrait sitting was scheduled for tomorrow morning, and she'd wanted to wear something that reminded her of home, of the life before Halcrest Manor and cold stone walls and a husband who looked through her like she was made of glass. Her mother had died when Elara was 16. Fever, quick and brutal. Her father had followed 2 years later. Grief, the doctors said, though Elara suspected it was more complicated than that. Either way, she'd been left alone at 18 with a modest inheritance and a string of distant relatives who saw her as either a burden or an opportunity. Enter Duke Rowan Halcrest, 32, widowed, in need of a wife to solidify his position at court. And Elara, young, well-bred, desperate for security, had seemed like a perfect solution. The wedding had been beautiful. She remembered that. White roses everywhere, music that made her chest ache, vows spoken in a cathedral that echoed with centuries of similar promises. She'd actually believed it might work, that they might grow to care for each other at least. 3 years later, she knew better. Rowan had never pretended to love her. She'd give him that much. But she hadn't expected the complete indifference. The way he spoke to her only when necessary, touched her only when producing an heir demanded it, looked at her only when others were watching. And now the affairs. Or maybe they'd been happening all along, and she'd just been too naive to notice. Her hand moved to her stomach again. The baby was barely real yet, just a cluster of cells, the physician had said, though he'd assured her everything was developing normally. But in that moment, sitting in her defiled bedroom while her husband entertained guests downstairs, that tiny collection of cells felt like the only solid thing in her entire existence. A knock on the door made her jump. "My lady?" It was Hannah, her maid. Young, sweet, probably the only person in this entire manor who looked at Elara like she was human. "Are you all right? His Grace said you had a headache, but I wanted to check." "I'm fine, Hannah." "You don't sound fine." Elara almost smiled. Hannah had been with her since the wedding, a gift from Rowan's household staff, though Elara suspected the girl had been assigned more as a spy than a comfort. But somewhere along the way, Hannah had become genuinely loyal. One of the few small graces in Elara's new life. "May I come in?" "No, not right now." Elara's voice cracked despite her best efforts. I need to be alone." Silence from the other side of the door. Then quietly, "I saw Lady Catherine leave your chambers earlier, looking quite disheveled." So Hannah knew. Of course she knew. Servants always knew everything. "I'm sorry, my lady," Hannah continued. "I'm so sorry. You deserve better than this." "Thank you, Hannah, truly." Elara stood, smoothing her dress, even though no one could see her. Old habits. "You can go. I'll be fine." More silence. Then footsteps retreating down the corridor. Elara walked to the window. From here she could see the gardens, perfectly manicured, of course, because nothing at Halcrest Manor was allowed to grow wild or chaotic. Everything controlled, everything in its proper place, including her. The thought should have made her angry. Instead, she just felt tired. Bone-deep exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour or the pregnancy draining her energy. She thought about her mother sometimes. Wondered what she would say about all this. Would she tell Elara to endure, to remember her duty and position? Or would she tell her to run? Not that running was an option. Women in her position didn't run. They endured. They survived. They produced heirs and maintained appearances and died quietly in their cold beds, leaving behind nothing but portraits and jewelry and cautionary tales. But that was before tonight, before the baby, before Elara Whitcombe finally understood that enduring wasn't the same as living. The next 3 days passed in a blur of routine and pretense. The portrait sitting happened. Elara wore her mother's necklace and smiled at the artist and said all the right things. Rowan didn't attend, too busy with estate business, he claimed, and Elara was grateful for his absence. She moved through her days like a ghost. Breakfast in the morning room, needlework in the afternoon, dinners where she sat at the opposite end of a table long enough to seat 20 and made polite conversation with whatever guests Rowan had invited. He'd stopped coming to her bed entirely after that night, which was probably for the best. She didn't think she could bear his touch anymore. Hannah noticed the change. "You're different," she said one morning while helping Elara dress. "Quieter." "I'm always quiet." "No, you're always polite. That's different. But now you're—" Hannah trailed off, struggling for words. "It's like you're not fully here anymore." Elara didn't argue. She wasn't fully there. Part of her was somewhere else entirely, making plans, calculating possibilities, thinking thoughts that would have terrified her a week ago. On the fourth day after the incident, she received a letter. Hannah brought it up with breakfast. Unusual, since correspondence was typically delivered to Rowan's study first. But this one was addressed specifically to Elara, and the handwriting was unfamiliar. "Who's it from?" Hannah asked, curious. Elara broke the seal, scanning the contents quickly. Her heart started beating faster. It was from her father's solicitor, Mr. Pembroke, a dry, efficient man she'd met exactly twice, once at her father's funeral and once to settle the estate. The letter was brief, professional, and completely unexpected. "Dear Lady Halcrest, I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing to inform you of a matter concerning your late father's estate that requires your attention. A small property that was previously entangled in legal dispute has recently been resolved in your favor. Though modest in value, it represents assets that are legally yours, independent of your marriage settlement." Elara read it 3 times, her pulse racing. Independent assets. Things that belong to her, not Rowan, not the Halcrest estate. Her. "Good news?" Hannah asked. "I'm not sure yet." Elara folded the letter carefully, her mind already spinning. "Hannah, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to not ask questions." Hannah's expression grew wary. "What kind of something?" "I need information about travel north, specifically to the coastal regions. Lodging, transport, what it costs, how someone might travel discreetly." The silence that followed was heavy. "My lady," Hannah said slowly, "what are you planning?" I said no questions. "And I'm saying this sounds dangerous. If His Grace found out, he won't find out, not from you." Elara met her maid's eyes directly. "I trust you, Hannah, but I understand if you can't help me, truly." Hannah stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, she nodded. "I have a cousin who works at the coaching house in town. He knows the routes. I'll talk to him, carefully." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Hannah's voice was grim. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, my lady, it's going to be harder than you imagine. The world isn't kind to women alone." "I know. Do you?" Hannah stepped closer, her voice dropping. "I mean, really know. Not the theoretical knowledge from books and gossip, but actual understanding. You've been protected your whole life. First by your parents, now by your position. Out there." She gestured vaguely toward the window, toward everything beyond the estate walls. "You'd have nothing. No name you could use, no connections, no protection, just yourself." "Maybe that's exactly what I need." The words surprised both of them. Hannah shook her head slowly, but she didn't argue further. "I'll get you the information. But promise me you'll think about this, really think." "I promise." It wasn't entirely a lie. Elara was thinking about it, constantly. Every waking moment, and most of her sleeping ones, too. The idea had started as a fantasy, a daydream of escape, but it was solidifying into something more concrete, something possible. She had assets now. Small, yes, but independent. Enough to disappear if she was careful. She had a reason. The baby. Her child wouldn't grow up watching its mother be treated like furniture. Wouldn't learn that this was what marriage looked like, what love looked like. What she didn't have was courage. Not yet. But maybe that would come. The decision crystallized a week later at another one of Rowan's endless social gatherings. This one was smaller than the last. Only 30 guests instead of 100, but no less suffocating. Elara wore blue silk, her hair arranged in an elaborate style that gave her a headache, and smiled until her face ached. Rowan was in his element, moving through the crowd with practiced charm. He touched her elbow occasionally, a performance of husbandly attention for anyone watching. Up close, his eyes were cold. "Lady Halcrest," someone said. Lord Pemberton, one of Rowan's associates. "You look radiant this evening. Marriage certainly agrees with you." "Too kind," Elara murmured automatically. "And we're all hoping for good news soon, eh?" Pemberton nudged Rowan conspiratorially. "An heir to carry on the Halcrest name?" Rowan's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "All in due time." "Well, don't wait too long. Not getting any younger, either of you." Pemberton laughed at his own joke, oblivious to the tension in Elara's spine. Later, when they were briefly alone, Rowan leaned close. To anyone watching, it would look intimate, tender. 3 years, he said quietly. 3 years and nothing. Perhaps the problem isn't circumstance, Elara. Perhaps it's you. She'd been taking a sip of wine. She nearly choked on it. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Maybe you're barren. It would certainly explain—" "I'm pregnant." The words were out before she could stop them. Sharp, defensive, stupid. Rowan went completely still. "What?" "I'm pregnant," she repeated, quieter now. 3 months. I was going to tell you after the party." She watched emotions flash across his face. Surprise. Calculation. Something that might have been relief or triumph. Not joy. Never joy. 3 months, he said finally. "You've known for 3 months and said nothing?" I wanted to be sure. A lie. She'd known for nearly a month, had been putting off telling him because once he knew, everything would change. The baby would cease being hers and become his. Another piece of property, another tool for legacy. Rowan's expression smoothed into satisfaction. "Well, that changes things. We'll need to make an announcement, carefully timed, of course, and you'll need to be more careful with your activities. No more wandering the gardens alone, no heavy lifting. I'm not an invalid." "No, but you're carrying my heir. That makes you valuable." He actually smiled like he'd paid her a compliment. "We'll increase your security. Can't be too careful." Valuable. Not loved. Not cherished. Valuable. Like a horse or a piece of property worth insuring. Something inside Elara snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, final breaking of something that had been cracking for years. "If you'll excuse me," she said calmly, "I need some air." She walked away before Rowan could respond, moving through the crowd with her smile still fixed in place. No one stopped her. No one noticed. She was too good at being invisible. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. Elara walked to the edge of the garden, to the stone wall that separated the manicured grounds from the wild forest beyond. She put her hand on the wall, felt the rough stone beneath her palm. Real. Solid. Unlike everything else in her life. Behind her, the party continued. Laughter and music and the clink of glasses. Her husband was probably already spreading the news, accepting congratulations, calculating how this would affect his political standing. In front of her, darkness. Unknown. Terrifying. And somewhere in between, a choice. Elara had spent 3 years trying to be the perfect duchess, trying to make this marriage work, trying to become someone Rowan might actually see as human. It hadn't worked. It was never going to work. But she had a child now, a child who deserved better than this, better than a father who saw people as tools and a mother who'd given up. She thought about her own mother again, about the last thing she'd said before the fever took her. "Don't let anyone make you smaller than you are, Elara. Not even the ones who claim to love you." Her mother had been delirious by then, burning with fever. Probably didn't even know what she was saying, but Elara had remembered, and standing there in the cold garden, her hand pressed against stone, Elara Whitcombe made her choice. She was going to run. Planning an escape was harder than she'd imagined. Hannah had been right about that. For the next 2 weeks, Elara played her role perfectly. She smiled at Rowan's announcement of her pregnancy. She accepted congratulations from people who barely knew her. She allowed the physician to examine her weekly, listened to his lectures about rest and diet and proper behavior for expectant mothers. And in the stolen moments between performances, she planned. Hannah provided the crucial information. Her cousin at the coaching house gave them routes, schedules, costs. The northern coastal regions were harsh but cheap, places where a woman alone might disappear without too many questions if she had enough money. Money was the problem. Elara's inheritance from her father had been absorbed into the Halcrest estate upon marriage, as was customary. The newly discovered property was worth something, but accessing those funds would require time and documentation she didn't have. Rowan controlled everything: her accounts, her allowances, even her jewelry. Or so he thought. The truth was, Elara's mother had been cleverer than anyone knew. She'd given her daughter pieces over the years, a ring here, a bracelet there, all with the same quiet instruction. Keep these separate. Don't tell your father. Just in case. Just in case of what? Her mother had never specified. But Elara understood now. She had 7 pieces of jewelry hidden in various locations around her chamber. Small, valuable, easily portable. Worth enough to survive on for months if she was careful. The plan formed slowly, revised constantly. She'd leave during the next large gathering, another party, scheduled for the end of the month. Everyone would be distracted. She could slip away, take a coach north, become someone else. The fake identity was Hannah's idea. You can't be Lady Halcrest anymore, she said practically. Too recognizable. You need a new name, new story. Mara Thorne, Elara suggested. It had come to her in a dream, common enough to be forgettable, strong enough to feel real. Widow, traveling to her late husband's family in the north. Hannah nodded slowly. That could work. Widows travel alone sometimes, it's not unheard of, but you'll need to look the part. Simpler clothes, different hair, and you'll need to practice being someone else. The way you talk, move, even think, it all screams nobility right now. So Elara practiced. In her chamber, alone, she tried on different voices, different postures. Tried to shed the years of training that had taught her to move gracefully, speak softly, disappear politely into the background. Becoming Mara Thorne was harder than creating her. Elara had spent her entire life being refined. Mara needed to be rougher, harder, less apologetic. You're still too nice, Hannah observed after watching Elara practice asking for lodging. Mara wouldn't ask, she'd demand, or at least sound like she expected to get what she paid for. I don't know how to sound demanding. Then learn, because out there, being nice will just get you taken advantage of. The words stung because they were true. 3 days before this party, Rowan summoned her to his study. Elara went with her heart pounding, terrified he'd somehow discovered the plan. But he just wanted to discuss nursery arrangements. I've had the West Wing rooms prepared, he said, not looking up from his papers. Far enough from the main chambers to avoid disturbing my work. Close enough for you to maintain supervision. The wet nurse has been selected. We'll need to interview governesses soon, though not until after the birth, obviously. Obviously, Elara echoed. I've also made arrangements for your confinement. You'll remain on the estate grounds for the duration of your pregnancy. Too risky otherwise. You're confining me? I'm protecting my heir. He finally looked at her, and his expression was so matter-of-fact it chilled her. You understand the difference, I'm sure. Of course. She left his study shaking. The plan had just become more urgent. Once Rowan truly locked her down, and he would, she had no doubt, escaping would become impossible. That night, she took stock of everything she had. The jewelry, hidden in different locations. Some clothes suitable for traveling. A small amount of cash she'd been squirreling away from her household allowance. The information from Hannah about routes and lodging. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. Hannah found her packing late that night, carefully, just a few items at a time so nothing looked obviously missing. It's really happening, Hannah said. Not a question. Yes, I'm scared for you. I'm scared too. Elara folded a simple dress, her hands steady despite the fear. But I'm more scared of staying. Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Then, I want to come with you. Elara's head snapped up. What? I want to come with you. Help you. You'll need someone who knows how things work outside these walls, and I... No. The refusal was immediate. Hannah, you have family here. A position. Security. I can't let you risk all that. Can't or won't. Hannah's jaw was set stubbornly. You said you trusted me. I do. Which is exactly why I won't let you destroy your life for mine. My life? Hannah laughed bitterly. I'm a servant, my lady. This isn't my life. It's servitude. You're the only person in this entire manor who's ever treated me like I'm human. Let me return the favor. Elara felt something hot burning behind her eyes. If we're caught, then we're caught together. Better than staying here alone. They stared at each other across the half-packed trunk. "Are you sure?" Elara asked finally. "I've never been more sure of anything." "Then we leave together." Elara held out her hand. After a moment, Hannah took it. "But not as lady and servant anymore, as equals." "Mara and Hannah," Hannah said with a small smile. "Has a nice ring to it." For the first time in weeks, Elara smiled back. A real smile, not the polite mask she wore for Rowan and his guests. Maybe she wasn't completely alone after all. The party was in 2 days. 2 days until freedom or disaster. Elara spent every moment preparing, triple-checking every detail. The jewelry was distributed between her and Hannah, safer than keeping it all in one place. The clothes were packed, the story rehearsed until it felt almost real. The night before the party, she barely slept, lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, one hand on her still flat stomach. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered to the baby, "so you never have to feel invisible, so you grow up knowing you're worth more than your name or position, so you're free." The baby, of course, didn't answer, but Elara felt something shift inside her anyway. Not physically, it was too early for that, but emotionally. Like a door closing on who she'd been and another opening on who she might become. Tomorrow night, Duchess Elara Whitcombe would disappear, and Mara Thorne would begin. The party was everything Rowan loved. Excessive, showy, packed with people who mattered. Elara moved through it like a ghost, her smile painted on, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Hannah had helped her dress carefully. The emerald gown was elaborate enough to fit the occasion, but designed to hide the small bag strapped to her thigh beneath layers of petticoats. Inside, 2 pieces of her mother's jewelry, enough money for the first leg of travel, and forged travel documents Hannah's cousin had procured through connections Elara didn't ask about. The rest of their belongings, minimal, carefully chosen, were already hidden in the gardener's shed near the eastern wall. Hannah would retrieve them during the confusion of the evening. "You look pale," Rowan observed when he found her near the refreshment table. His hand settled on her lower back, possessive. For the guests watching, probably. "Are you unwell?" "Just tired. The baby—" "Yes, of course." His voice softened exactly enough for nearby listeners to hear. "You should rest more. I worry about you." The performance was flawless. If Elara didn't know better, she'd almost believe he cared. "Perhaps I'll retire early," she said carefully. "The noise is rather overwhelming." Rowan's eyes narrowed slightly. "It's barely past 9. People will talk. Let them talk about how devoted my husband is, insisting I prioritize my health." She touched his arm lightly, playing the game one last time. "Surely that reflects well on you." He considered this, then nodded. 1 hour. Make your excuses gracefully, then I'll escort you upstairs myself. Publicly, the dutiful husband attending his expectant wife. Perfect. Exactly what she needed. Elara spent the next hour in agony, making rounds, accepting well wishes about the baby, listening to unsolicited advice from women who'd never looked at her before the pregnancy made her relevant. Every minute crawled. Every conversation felt like a trap waiting to spring. At 10 o'clock precisely, Rowan appeared at her elbow. "Shall we?" They climbed the grand staircase together, Rowan's hand supporting her arm. Anyone watching would see devotion. Elara felt the weight of a chain. At her chamber door, he paused. "Rest well. I'll check on you later." "That's not necessary. I insist." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're carrying something precious. I intend to be attentive." The door closed. Elara stood frozen, listening to his footsteps retreat. Then she moved. Fast. Practiced. She'd rehearsed this a dozen times. Off with the emerald gown, on with the plain traveling dress Hannah had altered from servant's clothing, down with the elaborate hair into a simple braid. The jewelry carefully wrapped and distributed into hidden pockets. Her hands shook, but she forced them steady. A soft knock. Hannah slipped inside, already changed into her own traveling clothes, a worn cloak over everything. The bags? Retrieved, hidden by the eastern gate. Hannah's eyes were bright with fear and excitement. "The coach leaves at 11. We need to go now." "Rowan said he'd check on me later." "Then we leave before later arrives." They moved through the servants' passages, narrow corridors Elara had never used before but Hannah knew intimately. The sounds of the party faded behind them, replaced by the creaking of old wood and their own harsh breathing. At the bottom of a service stairwell, Hannah grabbed Elara's arm. Last chance. Once we're through that door, there's no going back. Elara thought of her chamber, her life. The cold bed and colder husband, the future stretching ahead like a prison sentence. I'm already gone, she said. The eastern gate was exactly where Hannah promised, tucked behind overgrown hedges, rusted from disuse but still functional. Hannah produced a key that shouldn't have existed, and the gate swung open with a groan that sounded deafening in the quiet night. Beyond the estate walls, the world was dark and unfamiliar. They grabbed their bags, 2 small cases, pathetically inadequate for starting a new life, and ran. The town was 2 miles away. They walked fast, stumbling occasionally on the rutted road, jumping at every sound. Elara's lungs burned. Her feet ached in shoes designed for carpeted hallways, not rough country paths. But she didn't stop. Behind them, Halcrest Manor blazed with light and music. Ahead, darkness and possibility. They reached the coaching house at 10:15. Hannah's cousin, a wiry man named Thomas, who asked no questions and offered no judgments, had a coach waiting. Not a nice one. The seats were hard. The interior smelled like old leather and older sweat, but Elara had never seen anything more beautiful. North Route, Thomas said, accepting the coins Hannah handed him. Stops in Millbrook, then Ashford, then coastal towns. You'll want Ravenshaw, I'm thinking. Remote, cheap. People mind their own business there. Ravenshaw, Elara repeated, testing the name. Rough place, Thomas warned. Fishing village mostly. Hard living. You sure that's what you want? I'm sure. He shrugged. Your funeral. Coach leaves in 20 minutes. Driver's name is Beck. Decent fellow. Won't cause trouble. You'll share the coach with whoever else paid for passage, so keep your story simple and your valuables hidden. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Elara's life. Every sound made her jump. Every person passing the coaching house looked like one of Rowan's men. Hannah kept watch by the window, while Elara sat rigid on a bench, her hand pressed against the bag containing everything she owned. No one's coming, Hannah whispered. They don't know yet. You're still at the party in their minds, still playing your part. But Elara couldn't relax. Wouldn't. Not until the coach was moving, putting distance between her and everything she was running from. At 11 o'clock exactly, a gruff voice called out, North Route, Ravenshaw and points between. Load up. They climbed aboard. The coach already held 3 other passengers. A merchant with a nervous face, an elderly woman who smelled like camphor, and a young man who looked like trouble. No one spoke. No one asked questions. The driver's whip cracked. The coach lurched forward, and Duchess Elara Whitcombe disappeared into the night. The journey was brutal. The coach rattled over roads that seemed designed to shatter bones. Every pothole sent them bouncing. Every sharp turn threatened to overturn the whole vehicle. The merchant vomited twice into a bucket. The elderly woman complained constantly. The young man watched everyone with suspicious eyes. Elara kept her head down, her face partially hidden by her cloak. Hannah sat beside her, maintaining the pretense that they were merely traveling companions, not lady and servant fleeing a powerful duke. At dawn, they stopped in Millbrook. The merchant stumbled out, looking green. 2 new passengers boarded, farmers heading to market. The coach stank of unwashed bodies and fear. How much further? Elara whispered to Hannah when they had a moment alone. 2 more days. Maybe 3 if the weather turns. 2 more days trapped in this rolling prison. 2 more days of terror that every stop would bring Rowan's men. But also 2 more days closer to freedom. They traveled through countryside Elara had never seen. Rolling hills gave way to rougher terrain. Villages became smaller, poorer. The people they passed looked harder, weathered by lives spent fighting against elements that didn't care about titles or status. This was the world beyond the estate walls. The world Elara had been protected from her entire life. It was terrifying. It was real. And for the first time, she felt like she could breathe. At the second stop, Ashford, a grim town that smelled like coal smoke and desperation, Hannah bought bread and cheese from a market stall. They ate in the coach, trying not to attract attention. You're doing well, Hannah said quietly. Better than I expected. I'm exhausted. Everyone's exhausted. That's not what I meant. Hannah tore off a piece of bread, chewing thoughtfully. You're adapting, becoming someone else. Mara suits you better than Elara ever did. The words hit harder than intended, because they were true. Elara Whitcombe had been a carefully constructed performance. Mara Thorne, rough, uncertain, scared but determined, felt more honest than anything Elara had been in years. They pushed north. The landscape grew harsher. Trees became sparse. Wind carried the salt smell of ocean. The temperature dropped, and Elara pulled her thin cloak tighter, wishing she'd brought something warmer. On the third day, the elderly woman started asking questions. "You're awfully refined for someone traveling north," she observed, her sharp eyes fixed on Elara. "Your hands are too soft. Your speech too proper. What's a girl like you doing on a coach to Ravenshore?" Elara's throat went dry. Beside her, Hannah tensed. "My husband died," Elara said, using the story they'd practiced. "I'm traveling to his family. They have a fishing business." "Fishermen don't marry ladies." The woman's voice was casual, but her gaze was calculating. "Even ones pretending not to be ladies." "I'm not—" "Save it!" The woman waved a dismissive hand. "Don't care what you're running from, just don't bring trouble to Ravenshore. That town's got enough problems without adding yours." The rest of the journey passed in tense silence. Elara kept her eyes down, her heart racing. If one old woman could see through her disguise this easily, how long before others did? How long before word spread? Before Rowan's men came looking? They reached Ravenshore on the fourth day, just as the sun was setting over a gray, angry ocean. The town was everything Thomas had warned and worse. Rough wooden buildings clustered against the coast like they were trying to avoid being swept into the sea. The streets were mud and fish guts. The people looked hard and suspicious, eyeing the coach passengers like they were either potential customers or potential threats. "End of the line," the driver called. "Ravenshore, and good luck to you." Elara and Hannah climbed down on shaking legs. 4 days in the coach had left them bruised and sore. The cold wind off the ocean cut through their inadequate clothing. The smell of rotting fish was overwhelming. "We made it," Hannah whispered, but she didn't sound relieved. She sounded terrified. Elara looked at the town, if it could even be called that. This was the edge of the world, the place where people came when they had nowhere else to go. Perfect. "We need lodging," she said, forcing her voice steady. "And work." "Work?" Hannah stared at her. "You've never worked a day in your life." "Then I'll learn." They found a boarding house near the docks. The proprietor was a woman named Greta, 50-something, built like a barrel, with eyes that missed nothing. "2 rooms or 1?" she asked, looking them over with obvious skepticism. "1," Elara said. "Cheaper." "How much?" 4 coppers a week, 6 if you want meals included. It was robbery. Elara knew that even with her limited experience, but they had no leverage and nowhere else to go. 6, she agreed. "For 2 weeks to start." Greta's eyebrow rose. "Got money, do you?" "Enough to pay our way." Elara met her eyes directly, channeling Mara Thorne instead of Elara Whitcombe. "We're not charity cases. We work for what we get." Something shifted in Greta's expression. Respect, maybe. Or at least less suspicion. "Fine. Rooms upstairs. 3rd door, shared privy at the end of the hall, meals at sunrise and sunset. You want anything else, you pay extra." She paused. "And whatever you're running from, keep it outside my house. I don't need trouble." "Understood." The room was tiny. 1 narrow bed, a washstand with a cracked basin, a window that looked out over the docks. No fire. No comfort. Nothing like the chambers Elara had left behind. It was perfect. They collapsed on this bed together because there wasn't room for alternatives. And for the first time in 4 days, Elara allowed herself to feel the weight of what they'd done. "We actually did it," Hannah said into the darkness. "We actually got away. For now." "You think he'll come after you?" Elara thought about Rowan, about his pride, his control, his absolute belief that everything in his life belonged to him, including her. "Yes," she said quietly. "Eventually, when he realizes I'm not coming back, when it becomes about pride instead of possession, then we need to disappear, really disappear, become people he'd never recognize. I don't know how to be anyone but who I am." "You learned to be Elara," Hannah pointed out. "The perfect duchess, the invisible wife. If you can learn that, you can learn this." Morning came too early, announced by Greta pounding on their door. "Breakfast! Miss it, you starve!" The meal was porridge, gray, lumpy, barely edible. Elara forced it down, her stomach rebelling. Around her, other boarders ate in silence. Working people, she realized. Fishermen, dock workers, women who did laundry or mended nets, people who survived through labor, not inheritance. After breakfast, Elara approached Greta. "You mentioned work. Where would someone find it here?" Greta looked her over critically. "Depends. What can you do?" The honest answer was nothing. Elara could play piano, speak 3 languages, arrange flowers, and make polite conversation, none of which mattered in Ravenshore. "I can learn," she said instead. "Learning costs time, and time costs money." But Greta didn't dismiss her entirely. "Fishwives are always looking for help mending nets. Pays almost nothing, ruins your hands, but it's work." "Where do I find them?" "Docks. Look for the women with the nets. Tell them Greta sent you. They'll probably still rob you blind on the rate, but at least they'll give you a chance." The docks were chaos. Men hauling fish, boats coming and going, gulls screaming overhead. The smell was indescribable. Elara's eyes watered. She found the fishwives in a covered area near the water, 6 women ranging from young to ancient, their hands moving with practiced speed through tangles of netting. They looked up as Elara approached, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. "Greta sent me," Elara said, trying to sound confident. "Said you might need help." The oldest woman, 60 at least, with hands like tree bark, laughed. "Greta's got a sense of humor. Look at you, soft as butter. You'd cut yourself to ribbons in an hour." "I'm tougher than I look." "Are you now?" The woman gestured to an empty spot. "Sit. Let's see." Elara sat. The woman handed her a section of net and a thick needle. "Basic repair. Follow the pattern. Keep the stitches tight. Don't stab yourself." It looked simple. It wasn't. Within 10 minutes, Elara's fingers were bleeding. The rough rope tore its skin unused to anything harsher than silk. The needle slipped constantly. Her stitches were loose and uneven. The women watched with expressions ranging from amusement to pity. "Told you," the old woman said. "You're not built for this, girl. Best find softer work." "There isn't any." Elara's voice came out sharper than intended. "And I need this. Please, I'll get better." "Why?" Another woman spoke up, younger, harder. "Why do you need it? You're clearly not from here, not from anywhere like here. So what are you doing in Ravenshore?" The question hung in the air. All the women had stopped working, watching Elara with varying degrees of suspicion. She could lie, should lie, but something about the directness of the question, the earned hardness in these women's faces, made dishonesty feel worse than exposure. "I'm running," she said simply. "From a marriage that was killing me, from a man who thought he owned me." She held up her bleeding hands. "I don't know how to do this, any of this, but I'm learning, because going back isn't an option." Silence. Long enough that Elara was sure she'd miscalculated, that they'd turn her away, or worse, turn her in. Then the old woman grunted. "At least you're honest. Stupid, but honest." She picked up the net Elara had butchered. "This is garbage. You'll redo it. And the next one. And the one after that until you stop making garbage. We pay by the piece, and your pieces aren't worth paying for yet. But," she paused, "you can watch, learn, and we'll see if those soft hands can develop calluses." It wasn't kindness, but it was a chance. Elara spent the next week bleeding into fishing nets. Her hands developed blisters that popped and bled and scabbed and split open again. Her back ached from hunching over the work. Her eyes burned from squinting at tiny knots in dim light. She was miserable. And strangely, almost happy. Because this was hers. Her pain, her progress, her survival. Not Rowan's. Not anyone's, but hers. Hannah found work at the boarding house, helping Greta with cooking and cleaning in exchange for reduced rent. Between them, they scraped together enough to survive. Barely. At night, they'd collapse in their tiny room, too exhausted to talk. Elara's pregnancy was starting to show, just a small curve that could still be hidden under loose clothing, but growing. She felt the baby move sometimes, little flutters that reminded her why all of this mattered. 3 weeks in, one of the fishwives, the younger, harder one named Sal, approached her after work. "You're getting better," she said grudgingly. Still slow, but better. Might actually be worth paying soon. Thank you. Don't thank me. You earned it. Sal studied her. But you need to be more careful. Careful how? The way you move, the way you speak. You're trying, but it's not natural yet. Anyone looking would see you're not what you pretend to be. She leaned closer. And people are starting to look. Elara's blood went cold. What do you mean? There's been men asking around, well-dressed, offering money for information about newcomers, women traveling alone or in pairs, specifically women who might be hiding something. Rowan. It had to be Rowan's men. How long? Couple days. Haven't reached the docks yet, but they will. This town's small. Secrets don't keep long. Sal's expression was unreadable. Whatever you're running from must be powerful, the kind of powerful that doesn't stop looking. I need to leave. And go where? You barely survive here, and here is cheap. Anywhere else, you'd need more money, more skill, more everything than you have. Sal shook her head. Running only works if you've got somewhere to run to. She was right. Elara felt the trap closing. Not enough money to move on. Not enough skill to disappear properly. And Rowan's net tightening with every day. That night, she couldn't sleep. Lay beside Hannah in the narrow bed, listening to the ocean and trying to plan. But every scenario ended the same way. Discovery, capture, return to Halcrest Manor, in disgrace. Return to being property. We could go further north, Hannah whispered in the darkness. Past Ravenshore. There are smaller places. Harder places. With what money? We've barely got enough to eat here. Then we steal it. Elara turned to stare at her. What? I'm serious. Those men asking questions, they're carrying purses. Rich men always are. We wait, we follow one, we take what we need. Hannah's voice was matter of fact. It's not ideal, but neither is getting dragged back to your husband. I can't. That's criminal. So is what he did to you. Just because it was legal doesn't make it right. Hannah sat up. I'm not saying I like it. I'm saying we might not have a choice. Before Elara could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Heavy, multiple people, moving with purpose, then pounding on their door. Open up! Official business of the Duke of Halcrest! Elara's heart stopped. Hannah grabbed her arm, nails digging in. The pounding came again. We know you're in there. Open this door or we break it down. They were out of time, out of options, out of everything except one desperate choice. Elara looked at the window. 3 stories up. No obvious way down. But next to their building, close enough to jump if you were insane or desperate enough, was another rooftop. The window, she breathed. You're pregnant. I can't get caught. Elara was already moving, pulling on her boots with shaking hands. We go now or we go back? Choose. The door shuddered under another impact. Wood splintered. Hannah cursed viciously and grabbed their bag. If we die, I'm haunting you forever. They pushed the window open. Cold wind rushed in. Below, the docks stretched out in darkness. The gap to the next building looked impossibly wide. Behind them, the door burst open. Elara jumped. The coastal town of Brincliffe existed in a permanent state of gray. Gray sky, gray ocean, gray stone buildings that hunched against the wind like old men waiting to die. Mara stood at the edge of the cliff overlooking the harbor, her hands raw from 3 months of work she'd never imagined doing, and watched fishing boats fight their way through choppy water. She'd stopped thinking of herself as Elara weeks ago. That woman was dead. Had to be, for this to work. You're going to freeze out here. Hannah appeared beside her, wrapped in a wool shawl that had seen better days. They both had. Mrs. Garrett wants the floors done before dark. I know. But Mara didn't move. Couldn't, not yet. The ocean was the only thing in this miserable place that felt honest. It didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was. Cold, brutal, indifferent. Kind of like her new life. The boarding house where they'd found work was a sagging 3-story structure that smelled permanently of fish and damp wood. Mrs. Garrett, the owner, was a widow with a face like carved stone and a voice that could strip paint. She'd hired them without asking too many questions, which meant she either didn't care about their past or assumed they were running from something. She wasn't wrong. How's the baby? Hannah asked quietly. Mara's hand moved to her stomach. 4 months now. Still not showing much thanks to the loose work dresses and the weight she'd lost from the physical labor. But she could feel it, a presence, a pressure, a reminder of everything she'd left behind and everything she was doing this for. Strong, she said. Stubborn. Takes after its mother, then. The comment almost made Mara smile. Almost. They walked back to the boarding house together, their boots crunching on gravel. The town was small, maybe 300 people on a good day, and everyone knew everyone else's business, or thought they did. The story Mara and Hannah had settled on was simple. Hannah was the widow, Mara her younger sister, both fleeing debts after Hannah's husband had died bankrupt. It wasn't elaborate enough to invite scrutiny, wasn't sympathetic enough to invite charity. Perfect, in other words. There you are. Mrs. Garrett stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Thought you'd run off, again. Just getting air, Mara said. Air doesn't scrub floors. Get to it. And you... She pointed at Hannah. The kitchen needs attention. We've got fishermen coming for supper, and I won't have them complaining about the state of things. They worked until their hands bled. Literally. Mara's palms, once soft and carefully maintained, were now covered in calluses and cuts that never quite healed. The lye soap they used for cleaning was brutal, and the cold made everything worse. But she didn't complain. Complaining was for people who had options. That night, lying on the thin mattress in the tiny room they shared, Hannah whispered, "Do you ever regret it?" "Every day," Mara admitted, "and not at all. Both things at the same time. That doesn't make sense." "Nothing about this makes sense." Hannah was quiet for a moment, then, "I saw someone today, in town, asking questions." Mara's entire body went rigid. "What kind of questions?" "About newcomers, women traveling alone. He was well-dressed, too well-dressed for this place." Hannah's voice was careful, controlled, but Mara could hear the fear underneath. "I don't think he saw me. But Mara, if they're looking..." "They're always looking." Mara forced herself to breathe normally. "Rowan won't stop. You know that. Maybe we should move again." "To where?" "We're almost out of money. The jewelry's gone except for one piece, and I need to save that for..." She stopped, couldn't finish the sentence. "For when the baby comes. For when everything got exponentially harder." "We could go further north," Hannah suggested, "past the settlements. Where nobody what? Where we'd freeze to death? Where I'd give birth in a cave?" Mara turned to face her friend in the darkness. "We're barely surviving here, Hannah. Further out, we'd just be dead." The brutal honesty sat between them like a third person. "I'm sorry," Hannah said finally. "I shouldn't have said anything. The man probably wasn't even..." "Describe him." "What?" "Describe him. Everything you remember." Hannah hesitated. Tall, dark hair, expensive coat, but worn like he'd been traveling rough. He had... She paused. He had this way of looking at people, like he could see right through them. Mara's blood turned to ice. She knew exactly one person who looked at people like that. "It's not him," Hannah said quickly, reading her expression even in the dark. "It can't be. Why would a duke come all the way out here? He'd send men, not..." "You don't know Rowan." Mara sat up, her heart hammering. "When he wants something, he doesn't delegate. He takes it himself." "But it's been 3 months. Surely he would have..." "3 months is nothing." Mara was already moving, pulling on her dress with shaking hands. "He's patient when he needs to be. He'd wait, watch, gather information, and then he'd strike." "What are you doing?" "We need to leave. Now, tonight." "Mara, wait." Hannah grabbed her arm. "We can't just run every time someone asks questions. We'd never stop running." "Better that than caught." "You don't even know for sure it was him." "I don't have to know for sure." Mara yanked her arm free. "I just have to stay ahead of him." They stared at each other in the moonlight filtering through the cracked window. Hannah looked exhausted. Mara probably looked worse. "Please," Hannah said quietly. "Just wait until morning. See if he's still around. If he is, we'll leave immediately. But if we run now, in the dark, with no plan and almost no money..." She shook her head. "That's how we get caught. Or worse." Mara wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at her to move, hide, disappear, but Hannah was right. Running blind into the night with a baby growing inside her was suicide. "Morning," she agreed finally. "But at first light, we check. And if there's any sign..." "We leave," Hannah finished. I promise. Neither of them slept. Morning came with rain, the cold, driving kind that turned streets to mud and made everything miserable. Mara forced herself to go through the normal routine, breakfast preparation, cleaning, acting like everything was fine, but her eyes never stopped moving. Every footstep outside made her tense. Every shadow in the corner of her vision looked like Rowan. "You're going to give yourself away," Hannah muttered, passing her in the kitchen. "Calm down." "I am calm." "You're vibrating." Mrs. Garrett appeared before Mara could respond. "Stop gossiping and start working. We've got a full house tonight, and these vegetables won't chop themselves." Mara picked up the knife, her hand steadier than she felt. The work was actually helpful, gave her something to focus on besides the panic clawing at her throat. An hour passed, then 2. No sign of the well-dressed stranger. Maybe Hannah had been wrong. Maybe it was just a merchant passing through. Maybe... The front door opened. Mara looked up automatically, then froze. The man standing in the doorway was tall, dark-haired, wearing a coat that had once been expensive but was now mud-splattered and worn. He was dripping wet from the rain, his face partially obscured by shadows. But she knew him, would know him anywhere. The knife slipped from Mara's fingers, clattering against the cutting board. Rowan's eyes swept the room, passed over her once, then snapped back. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then his expression shifted into something she'd never seen before. Not anger, not triumph. Something rawer, more desperate. Elara. Her name. Her real name. Said in a voice that cracked on the second syllable. Mrs. Garrett was talking, saying something about lodging and rates, but Mara couldn't hear her over the roaring in her ears. She took a step backward, then another, her hip hitting the counter. "I'm sorry," Rowan said, still in the doorway, "but I'm looking for my wife." The room went silent. Mrs. Garrett looked between them, her expression hardening. "Your wife?" "She's been missing for 3 months. I've been searching." His eyes never left Mara's face. "I've been searching everywhere." "I think you've got the wrong place," Mrs. Garrett said firmly. "We don't—" "It's her." Rowan took a step forward. "I know it's her." "I don't know what you're talking about." Mara's voice came out stronger than she felt. "My name is Mara Thorne. You've made a mistake." "Elara, please, I said you've made a mistake." She forced herself to look directly at him, to meet those eyes that used to look through her like she was glass. "I'm not your wife. I don't know you." Rowan flinched like she'd hit him. "Don't do this." "Do what? Tell the truth?" Something hot and furious was building in her chest. "You want to talk about truth?" "Here's truth. I'm a widow working for my keep. You're a stranger making wild accusations. That's all this is." "The baby." Mara's hand went to her stomach before she could stop herself. The gesture was small, protective, automatic, and damning. Rowan's expression crumpled. "You're keeping it. He caught himself. "You're keeping the baby." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Stop lying." The words exploded out of him, loud enough to make everyone in the room jump. "Just stop. I know it's you. I can see it's you. Do you have any idea—" His voice broke. "Do you have any idea what these 3 months have been like?" "I imagine they've been very inconvenient," Mara said coldly. "Losing your heir and all." "I thought you were dead." The raw pain in his voice should have moved her. Once upon a time, it would have. But 3 months of survival had burned away the soft parts of her. "Maybe I am," she said. "The woman you married, she doesn't exist anymore." "Elara." "My name is Mara." They stared at each other across the small kitchen. Mrs. Garrett was watching with hawk-like intensity. Hannah had appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "We need to talk," Rowan said finally. "Alone." "No. Please, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." "You don't get to ask me for anything. I'm begging." The words seemed to cost him something. 5 minutes. Then if you want me to leave, I'll leave." Mara almost laughed. "You expect me to believe that? You'd just drag me back. I won't touch you. I swear it." He held up his hands, palms out. "I just want to talk. That's all." It was a trap. Had to be. But Mara found herself looking at Hannah, who gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "Outside," Mara said, "where others can see." Fine. They walked out into the rain. Mara was acutely aware of her appearance, the rough dress, the chapped hands, the hair pulled back in a simple braid instead of the elaborate styles she used to wear. She probably looked like a completely different person. Good. Rowan stopped at the edge of the building, under a small overhang that provided minimal shelter. Up close, Mara could see the changes in him too. He looked thinner, tired. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. "You look terrible," she said. "So do you." "At least I'm honest about it," he winced. "Fair enough." He was quiet for a moment, staring out at the rain. "I've been looking for 3 months. Hired investigators, followed every lead, spent every waking hour trying to find you." "Why?" The question seemed to surprise him. "Because you're my wife." "Your property, you mean?" "No, I mean," he rubbed his face with both hands. "I know that's how I treated you. I know what I did, what I've been doing for 3 years, and I know you have every right to hate me." "I don't hate you." The truth of it surprised her. "I just don't feel anything for you at all." That landed harder than any insult could have. She watched him absorb it, saw the way his shoulders curled inward. "The baby," he said after a long pause. Are you both all right?" "Why do you care?" "Because it's my child." "It's my child," Mara corrected sharply. "Mine. I'm the one carrying it. I'm the one who's going to birth it and raise it. You lost any claim when I left." "That's not how—" "How what? How the law works?" She laughed bitterly. "You think I care about the law? The law says I'm your property too. The law says I have no rights, no money, no say in my own life. So forgive me if I don't particularly care what the law has to say about my child." Rowan was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller. "I didn't come here to drag you back." "Liar." "I'm telling the truth. I came because—" He stopped, struggling with something. "I came because I needed to know you were alive, that you were safe, that's all." "Well, now you know. You can leave." "Just like that?" "Just like that." "What about the baby? Don't I have a right to—" "No." The word was steel. "You have no rights here. You gave them up when you chose Catherine over me. When you made it clear I was nothing but a tool for producing heirs. Well, guess what? The tool broke. The heir is mine now. And you can go back to your estate and your mistresses and your comfortable life and forget we ever existed." "I can't do that." "Why not?" "Because He looked at her directly for the first time, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. Not anger, not possession. Something that looked almost like desperation. "Because I was wrong. About everything. About you. About what matters. And I know it's too late. I know I destroyed any chance we had, but I can't just walk away. Not again." "You never walked away before. I did." "Exactly." He took a step closer, and she took a step back. He stopped immediately. "You were strong enough to leave, to survive, to build a new life from nothing. Do you have any idea how remarkable that is?" "Don't patronize me." "I'm not. I'm just—" He ran his hand through his wet hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "I'm trying to apologize. I'm trying to tell you that I see you now, really see you, and what I see is someone I don't deserve but can't stop thinking about." Mara stared at him. "You don't get to do this." "Do what?" "Show up after 3 months and say the right words and expect everything to be fixed. That's not how this works." "I know that." "Do you? Because it sounds like you think a pretty speech is going to make me forget 3 years of being treated like furniture." "No, I don't think that." His voice was quiet, honest. "I think you should hate me. I think you should tell me to leave and never come back. I think I deserve exactly that." "Then why are you here?" "Because even though I deserve it, I'm selfish enough to ask for a chance anyway." He looked at her, and there was something broken in his expression. "Not to go back. I know that's impossible, but maybe to go forward differently. To do better. With me as your wife again, living in that house, pretending everything's fine? No, never that. I'd give you—" He stopped, shook his head. "I'd give you whatever you wanted. A separate residence, your own funds, complete independence. Just let me be part of this." part of the baby's life, part of yours, even if only from a distance. It was everything she should want to hear. A powerful man offering her freedom, resources, acknowledgement of his wrongs. So why did it make her so angry? You think you can just buy your way back in? The words came out sharp. Throw money at the problem and make it go away? That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. You want to ease your conscience. You want to feel like you're doing the right thing without actually having to change anything fundamental about yourself. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. She was yelling now, 3 months of suppressed emotion pouring out. You had everything. Power, money, status, freedom. And I had nothing except the scraps you decided to throw me. And now you show up, looking tragic and remorseful, expecting me to feel sorry for you, to make this easy? I don't expect anything. You expect me to believe you've changed. That's something. They stood in the rain, breathing hard, the space between them charged with 3 years of unspoken resentment. What do you want me to say? Rowan asked finally. What words could possibly— There aren't any words, Mara interrupted. That's the point. You can't talk your way out of this. You can't negotiate or bargain or make deals. This isn't a business transaction. Then what is it? It's me telling you that you're too late. Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. You're 3 years too late, and I've built a life without you, a hard, terrible, barely surviving life, but it's mine, and I'm not giving that up. I'm not asking you to give anything up. Yes, you are. You're asking me to trust you again, to believe you've changed, to risk my child's future on your promises. She shook her head. I won't do it. Rowan looked like he'd been struck. So that's it? We're done. We were done the moment I walked out of Halcrest Manor. And the baby? Is mine. She put both hands on her stomach. Mine alone. Legally, that's not— I don't care about legally. The fury was back, hot and sharp. You want to talk about legal rights? Fine. Let's go to court. Let's explain to everyone why your pregnant wife disappeared. Let's talk about Catherine and all the others. Let's talk about how you treated me like I didn't exist. I'm sure that'll do wonders for the Halcrest reputation. The threat hung between them. Rowan's jaw tightened. You'd destroy us both just to keep me away? In a heartbeat, they stared at each other. Mara could feel her heart pounding, her hands shaking, every nerve in her body screaming at her to run, but she held her ground. I could force this, Rowan said quietly. I have the law on my side, the money, the power. Then do it. She lifted her chin. Take me back by force, lock me in that house. Control every aspect of my life like you did before. See how that works out for you. I don't want that. Then what do you want? You! The word burst out of him. I want you, not the Duchess I tried to mold you into, not the perfect, silent, obedient wife. You. This version. The one who looks at me like I'm nothing, who built a life from scraps, who's standing here in the rain looking like hell and somehow more alive than I've ever seen you. Mara felt something crack inside her chest. You don't get to want me now, not when it's convenient, not when you've lost control. It's not about control. Everything with you is about control. Not anymore. He took a step closer, hands raised in a gesture that might have been surrender or pleading. I spent 3 months thinking you were dead. 3 months imagining finding your body somewhere. And when I finally found you alive and safe and strong, I realized I'd been dead for 3 years, going through motions, playing a role. And you were the only real thing in my entire existence, and I'd treated you like you didn't matter. I didn't matter. Not to you. You did. You do. I just didn't know how to— He stopped, frustrated. I've never been good at this. Feelings? Vulnerability? My father beat it out of me when I was a child. Told me dukes don't feel, they command. And I've lived that way for so long I forgot there was any other way to be. I'm supposed to feel sorry for you now? No, I'm just trying to explain. I don't need explanations. I need you to leave. Mara— Leave! The name felt wrong on her tongue suddenly. She wasn't Mara, wasn't Elara either. She was something in between, something new and unfinished. Just go back to your life and let me have mine. I can't. Why not? Because I love you. The words hit her like a physical blow. Rowan looked as shocked as she felt, like he hadn't meant to say them, like they'd escaped without permission. You don't, Mara said. You don't even know me. I know enough. You know the ghost of a woman who used to do everything you said. That's not me anymore. I know, and that's what I love. He was looking at her like she was something precious and fragile. The strength, the fire, the way you're standing here telling me to leave when any other woman would have. Don't tell me what other women would do. You're right. I'm sorry. He took a breath. I'm going to do this wrong. I've already done it wrong. But I need you to know. I came here not knowing what I'd find, not knowing if you'd listen. And seeing you like this, seeing that you survived, that you're thriving in your own way, it doesn't make me want to control you. It makes me want to deserve you. You can't deserve someone by wanting to. I know. That's why I'm not asking you to come back. I'm asking you to let me stay. That stopped her. What? Let me stay. Here. In this place. Let me work. Earn my keep. Prove that I'm serious. That's insane. Probably. He managed a weak smile. But I've spent 3 months being insane. What's a little more? Rowan, I won't pressure you, won't make demands. I'll just be here. And maybe over time you'll see that I mean it. And if I never do, if I never forgive you, then at least I'll know I tried. His voice was steady now, certain. At least I'll know I did everything I could to be the man you deserved from the beginning. Mara opened her mouth to refuse, to tell him it was impossible, to send him away and never look back. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the desperation in his eyes. Maybe it was the exhaustion in her bones. Maybe it was the small, traitorous part of her that remembered what it felt like to not be alone. 3 days, she heard herself say. You can stay 3 days. After that, we talk again and I decide. 3 days, Rowan agreed immediately. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Mrs. Garrett works her lodgers to the bone, and you'll be treated like any other paying guest. No special treatment, no. Understood. They stood there in the rain, two people who'd promised to love each other for a lifetime and had failed spectacularly at it, now negotiating the smallest scraps of connection. I need to get back to work, Mara said finally. Of course. She turned to go, then paused. Rowan? Yes? If you hurt me again, or if you hurt this baby, I won't run next time. I'll destroy you completely. I know. Good. She walked back inside, her legs shaking, her mind racing. Hannah was waiting just inside the door. Are you completely out of your mind? Hannah hissed. You can't let him stay. I know. Then why? Because I need to see if he means it. Mara pressed her hands against the counter, steadying herself. I need to watch him fail. Watch him realize this life is too hard and give up and prove that everything he just said was a lie. I need that. And if he doesn't fail, then I guess we'll find out what happens next. Hannah looked at her for a long moment. You're either the bravest person I know or the stupidest. Can't it be both? That night, Rowan took a room in the boarding house. Mara lay awake listening to the sounds of him settling in 2 doors down, wondering what fresh hell she'd just invited into her carefully constructed new life. 3 days. She could survive 3 days. She'd survived worse. By noon the next day, Mara was questioning everything. Mrs. Garrett had put Rowan to work immediately, mucking out the stables behind the boarding house, hauling water, chopping wood for the stove, the kind of hard, dirty labor that men of his class paid others to do. He'd stripped down to his shirt sleeves and done it without complaint. Mara watched from the kitchen window, her hands mechanically peeling potatoes while her eyes tracked his movements. He was struggling. She could see that. His soft hands were probably already blistering. His back would ache tomorrow. This was a different world than the one he knew. He's not going to last, Hannah said, appearing beside her. Look at him. He can barely lift that bucket. Probably not. So why do you look worried? Mara hadn't realized she looked worried. She schooled her expression into neutrality. I'm not. Liar. They worked in silence for a while, but Mara's eyes kept drifting back to the window. Rowan had moved on to chopping wood now, and he was terrible at it. Took him 3 swings to do what a practiced hand could do in 1, but he kept trying. Mrs. Garrett's going to fire him if he doesn't improve, Hannah observed. Good. You don't mean that. I do. Then stop watching him. Mara forced her eyes away from the window. I need to make sure he doesn't hurt himself. Why? You don't care about him. I don't care about explaining to magistrates why a duke died at our boarding house. Hannah snorted. Keep telling yourself that. The day wore on. Mara went about her tasks, cleaned rooms, served meals, pretended everything was normal, but she could feel Rowan's presence like a splinter under her skin. At dinner, he sat with the other lodgers, fishermen mostly, rough men who'd spent their lives working the sea. They looked at him with undisguised suspicion. "You're that fancy one been asking questions," one of them said. A grizzled man named Garrett, no relation to Mrs. Garrett, despite the shared name. "Looking for your wife." "I was," Rowan said carefully. "I found her. And she wants nothing to do with you, I hear." "That's her right." "Damn straight it is?" Garrett leaned back, studying Rowan with narrowed eyes. "So what are you still doing here?" "Trying to make things right." The table erupted in laughter. Not kind laughter, the harsh, mocking kind. "You can't make things right by lurking around," another fisherman said. "Women don't want lurkers. They want men who know when they've lost." "Maybe I have lost," Rowan said quietly. "But I'd like the chance to— To what? Wear her down? Make her feel guilty?" Garrett shook his head. "That's not making things right. That's just being pathetic." Mara, serving stew at the next table, felt something twist in her chest. Part of her agreed with Garrett. Part of her wanted to defend Rowan, which was absurd. She didn't defend him, just kept serving food and pretending not to listen. After dinner, she found Rowan outside again, sitting on the steps leading to the stable. His hands were bandaged. Mrs. Garrett must have taken pity on him, and he looked exhausted. "You should go back inside," Mara said. "It's freezing." He looked up at her. "I'm fine." "You're shivering." "I said I'm fine." They sat in uncomfortable silence. Mara should walk away. Had a dozen tasks waiting, but her feet wouldn't move. "They're right, you know," Rowan said finally. The fisherman, "I am being pathetic." "Yes, but I don't know what else to do." He flexed his bandaged hands, wincing. "I've spent my entire life knowing exactly what to do. How to navigate society, politics, business. I always had the answer, the strategy. But this," he gestured vaguely between them, "I have no idea." "Then maybe you should leave." "Probably." He looked at her. "Will you make me?" "What?" "If you tell me to go, I'll go. Right now. No arguments." It was a test, or maybe a surrender. Mara couldn't tell which. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "Because I don't want to be another thing forcing itself on you. You've had enough of that." The honesty of it stole her breath. "The 3 days isn't up yet," she said instead of answering his real question. "So I can stay?" "I said 3 days. I meant it." She stood to go, then hesitated. "Rowan?" "Yes?" "Those fishermen, they're not wrong, but they're not entirely right either." "What do you mean?" "You can't make things right. What's done is done." She looked at him directly. "But maybe you can make things different if you're willing to actually do the work." "I am." "We'll see." She left him there, shivering on the steps, and went back inside. 2 more days. Then she'd decide. The decision terrified her more than anything else. The second day, Rowan got into a fight. Not a physical fight, though it almost came to that. An argument with one of the fishermen over breakfast, voices rising until Mrs. Garrett threatened to throw them both out. Mara only caught pieces of it, something about respect, about knowing your place. "You need to be more careful," she told Rowan later, finding him in the stable again. He seemed to gravitate there when he needed space. "Mrs. Garrett won't tolerate—" "He called you a whore," Rowan interrupted flatly. Mara blinked. "What?" "Garrett. He made a comment about women who leave their husbands. Called you a—" He stopped, jaw tight. "I told him to take it back." "And when he didn't?" "I suggested he might need help finding his manners." "Rowan, I know I shouldn't have. I know I'm supposed to keep my head down and not cause problems, but I'm not going to stand there and let him—" He broke off, breathing hard. "I won't let anyone talk about you like that." "They talk about me all the time," Mara said. "That's what people do in small towns. They gossip, they judge. I've learned to ignore it." "Well, I haven't." Then learn." She moved closer, keeping her voice low. "You can't defend my honor every time someone says something cruel. First, because my honor doesn't need defending. Second, because you'll just make everything worse. So I'm supposed to just accept it? You're supposed to understand that your name and title mean nothing here. You're just another lodger, and you fighting with fishermen over my reputation only makes them talk more. He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. You're protecting me. I'm protecting myself. If you get thrown out, everyone will ask why, and then they'll start asking more questions. About you, about me, about why a duke is living in a boarding house chasing after a woman who supposedly isn't his wife. Right, Rowan nodded slowly. Of course, strategy. Exactly. But as she walked away, Mara couldn't quite shake the memory of his face when he'd said, he called you a whore. The fury there, the genuine offense on her behalf. It shouldn't matter, didn't matter, except somehow it did. That evening, Mrs. Garrett called Mara into her private office, a cramped space that smelled of tobacco and old paper. Sit, she commanded. Mara sat. Mrs. Garrett studied her for a long moment. That man, your husband. I told you, he's not... Don't lie to me, girl. I've been running this house for 30 years. I know lies when I hear them. She leaned back in her chair. The question is, what do I do about it? Mara's heart sank. Mrs. Garrett, please. Please what? Let you keep working here while your highborn husband lurks around making trouble? She shook her head. I run a respectable establishment. Can't have that kind of drama. He'll be gone soon, just a few more days. Will he? Mrs. Garrett's eyes were sharp. Because from where I'm sitting, he looks like a man who's dug in for the long haul. He'll leave, Mara insisted. Once he realizes I'm not coming back, he'll leave. And if he doesn't? The question hung in the air. Then I'll make him leave, Mara said finally. One way or another. Mrs. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then, you love him. No, you do. I can see it. You're furious with him, and you hate yourself for caring, but you love him. You don't know what you're... I had a husband once, Mrs. Garrett interrupted. Terrible man, drank too much, gambled away our money, treated me like I was dirt on his boots. She paused. And I loved him anyway, hated myself for it, but couldn't stop. Mara felt something tighten in her chest. What happened to him? He died. Storm took him and half the fishing fleet, and you know what I felt? Mrs. Garrett's voice was hard. Relief. Finally, I was free. Could build this place, make my own money, live on my own terms. I'm sorry. Don't be. Best thing that ever happened to me was that storm. She looked at Mara directly. But here's the thing. I never got to find out if he could have changed. If maybe with enough time and motivation, he might have become someone worth loving. You think Rowan can change? I think people can surprise you, if you let them. Mara stood abruptly. If that's all, one more thing. Mrs. Garrett's voice stopped her at the door. That baby you're carrying, it's going to need a father. It has me. It has you, but it also has a man willing to sleep in a stable and fight fishermen to defend your name. Might be worth considering what that means. Mara left without responding. That night, she couldn't sleep. Lay awake listening to the wind howl outside, one hand on her stomach, mind churning. 3 years of marriage, 3 months of freedom. And now this. Rowan showing up, saying all the right things, doing all the right things, making her question everything she'd built. She hated him for it, hated herself more for starting to believe him. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and went downstairs for water. Found Rowan in the kitchen, doing the same. They stared at each other in the dim light from a single candle. Couldn't sleep? He asked. The baby's kicking. It was a lie. The baby was too small for that yet, but Rowan didn't know that. Can I... He stopped himself. Never mind. Can you what? Feel it. The kicking. He looked embarrassed. But that's inappropriate. I'm sorry. Mara should say no, should maintain the distance she'd worked so hard to create. Instead, she found herself crossing the kitchen, taking his hand, placing it on her stomach. Nothing happened. Of course nothing happened. She just said the baby was kicking to have something to say. But Rowan's hand was warm against her, and for a moment they stood there in the candlelight, connected by nothing more than the possibility of life growing between them. I meant it, he said quietly. What I said yesterday. All of it. I know. But you don't believe me. I want to. The admission cost her. But wanting and believing are different things. What would make you believe? Time. Consistency. Proof that this isn't just another role you're playing. He nodded slowly. I can do that. Can you? Because this life, she gestured around the sparse kitchen, it's not temporary for me. This is survival, and I need to know you understand the difference between slumming for a few days and actually living here. I understand. Do you? She pulled her hand away, creating distance again. Tomorrow, Mrs. Garrett is going to ask you to help fix the roof. It's dangerous work. Wet, slippery, easy to fall. The fishermen do it because they have to, because they can't afford to hire someone else. Can you do that, Rowan? Can you risk breaking your neck for a roof that isn't even yours? Yes. Why? Because you're here. And as long as you're here, so am I. The simple certainty of it should have annoyed her. Instead, it terrified her. Because she was starting to believe him. And believing him meant risking everything she'd fought so hard to protect. The third day dawned gray and wet. Rowan went up on the roof as predicted, working alongside two fishermen to patch the worst of the leaks. Mara tried not to watch, but every crash and curse from above made her flinch. Hannah noticed. You're going to wear a hole in the floor. I'm working. You're pacing. It's the same thing. Around noon there was a shout from above, then a terrible sliding sound, then silence. Mara's heart stopped. She ran outside, Hannah right behind her, and found Rowan hanging off the edge of the roof, fingers scrabbling for purchase on wet tiles. Don't move, one of the fishermen was shouting. We've got rope! But the tiles were giving way, sliding loose under his weight. Mara didn't think, just acted, grabbed the ladder and started climbing, ignoring Hannah's protests, ignoring the rain and the height and the danger. She reached the edge of the roof just as Rowan's grip failed, caught his wrist. For a heartbeat, they hung there, her anchored to the roof, him dangling over a 20-foot drop to hard ground. I've got you, she gasped. Don't let go. Mara, don't let go. The fisherman hauled them both back up, and they collapsed on the roof in a tangle of limbs and fear. Are you insane? Mara shouted when she could breathe again. You could have died. You climbed up here after me, Rowan pointed out, while pregnant. That's different. How? Because She stopped. Couldn't finish the sentence because I couldn't watch you fall. They stared at each other, both soaked, both shaking, both alive. Your 3 days are up, Rowan said quietly. What's your decision? Mara opened her mouth, and then the real storm hit. Not weather, though that got worse too, but something far more dangerous. A man appeared in the street below, well-dressed, carrying official-looking papers. Behind him, 6 armed guards. Duke Rowan Halcrest, the man shouted. By order of the Crown, you are commanded to return to the capital immediately to answer charges of abandonment of duty and dereliction of your position. Rowan went pale. No. Furthermore, the man continued, the woman known as Mara Thorne is to be detained for questioning regarding the disappearance of Duchess Elara Whitcombe. Mara's blood turned to ice. They'd been found. Not just found, trapped. And the choice she'd been about to make didn't matter anymore, because the world had just decided for her. The guards moved forward, hands on their weapons, and Mara felt Rowan's entire body go rigid beside her on the roof. Stay behind me, he said quietly. Don't be ridiculous. She was already calculating. 6 guards, 1 official, a crowd gathering in the street below, fishermen, workers, people who'd watched her scrub floors for 3 months. People who knew her as Mara, not some missing duchess. I can handle this, Rowan insisted. Like you handled the roof? She was moving before he could respond, climbing down the ladder with a recklessness that made Hannah shriek from below. Her boots hit the ground and she walked straight toward the official, her chin up, her work dress soaked and muddy. You're making a mistake, she said. The official, a thin man with a face like a rodent, looked her up and down with unconcealed contempt. You match the description, height, coloring, age. And this man, he gestured toward Rowan, who was climbing down after her, is definitely Duke Halcrest. So unless you'd like to add lying to a crown official to your list of offenses, I'm not lying, I'm Mara Thorne. No one cares what name you're using, girl. The official snapped his fingers and two guards moved forward. You're coming with us. Both of you. On what grounds? Rowan's voice was different now, not the desperate, broken man who'd shown up 3 days ago. This was the Duke speaking, cold, authoritative, dangerous. What exactly are the charges? I already stated them. Abandonment of duty for you, unlawful flight and possible theft for her. Theft of what? The official consulted his papers. Various items of jewelry belonging to the Halcrest estate, valued at approximately— Those were mine, Mara interrupted. Gifts from my mother, not part of any estate inventory. That's not what His Grace reported when he filed the initial complaint. Mara's head whipped toward Rowan. You reported me for theft? He had the decency to look ashamed. I was desperate. I thought if I made it official, someone might find you faster. Help you before, He stopped. It was stupid. I know that now. You bastard. The word came out flat, cold. You absolute bastard. Mara, please, don't. She turned back to the official. I'll go with you. Answer your questions. Prove those items were legally mine. But I want it in writing that Duke Halcrest acknowledges the theft claim was false. You're not exactly in a position to make demands. Neither are you. Mrs. Garrett's voice rang out from the boarding house doorway. She walked forward, her face set in grim determination, and behind her came the fishermen. All of them. Even Garrett, who'd called Mara a whore just yesterday. That girl's worked here for 3 months, paid her way, earned her keep. And you come here with your papers and your guards, accusing her of crimes? This is official crown business, the official sputtered. You can't interfere. We're not interfering. We're witnessing. Mrs. Garrett crossed her arms. And we'll all testify that Mara Thorne, whatever her real name is, has been nothing but honest and hardworking since she arrived. If she ran from something, she probably had good reason. The law doesn't care about reasons. Maybe it should. This came from one of the younger fishermen, a boy barely 20 who'd once helped Mara carry water when she was too tired to manage alone. Maybe the law should care that she's pregnant and you're treating her like a criminal. A murmur ran through the growing crowd. More people were emerging from buildings, drawn by the commotion. Mara recognized faces, the baker who'd given her day-old bread, the seamstress who'd mended her dress for free, the innkeeper who'd once let her warm herself by his fire when she had nowhere else to go. Small kindnesses. She'd thought they meant nothing, just people being decent, but now they were surrounding her, creating a barrier between her and the guards. This is absurd, the official snapped. She's a duchess. She belongs with her husband, not scrubbing floors in some backwater. She belongs wherever she damn well chooses. Garrett stepped forward, and despite his rough words about Mara before, his face was serious now. You want to take her? You'll have to go through all of us. The guard shifted uncomfortably. 6 armed men could definitely cut through an unarmed crowd, but it would be ugly, bloody, and word would spread. The official seemed to realize this. His face reddened. This is highly irregular. So is hunting a pregnant woman like she's a fugitive, Mrs. Garrett shot back. But here we are. Rowan had been silent through all of this, watching the townspeople defend Mara with an expression she couldn't quite read. Now he stepped forward. I'll go with you, he said. Answer the charges against me, but she stays. The theft claim is withdrawn. I'll put that in writing immediately, and she's done nothing illegal. Running from a bad marriage isn't a crime. Actually, it could be considered— It's not. Rowan's voice was steel. And if you try to make it one, I'll use every resource at my disposal to fight it. I'll drag this through courts for years. I'll make it so politically messy that whoever sent you will regret it. He paused. Or you can take me peacefully, let her be, and we can all avoid a great deal of unpleasantness. The official looked between them, clearly calculating. Mara could see the moment he decided it wasn't worth the fight. Fine, he said tightly, but she needs to provide a statement, for the record. She can do that here, Mrs. Garrett said, in my office, with witnesses present. That's not protocol. I don't care about your protocol. That's the offer. Take it or leave it. Another tense moment. Then the official nodded stiffly. Very well. The crowd didn't disperse. If anything, more people had gathered, creating a solid wall of bodies between Mara and the guards. She felt something strange and unfamiliar rising in her chest. These people barely knew her. She'd kept herself apart, shared nothing of her real story, given them no reason to care. But they were standing with her anyway. "Thank you," she said, her voice rough. "All of you. Thank you." Mrs. Garrett just nodded. "Go inside, get dry. We'll handle this." The statement taking was excruciating. The official asked question after question, trying to catch her in inconsistencies, but Mara had lived her cover story for 3 months. She knew it inside and out. Yes, she'd left her marriage. No, she hadn't stolen anything that wasn't hers. Yes, she was pregnant. No, she didn't want to return to her husband. Through it all, Rowan stood against the wall, saying nothing, his face unreadable. When it was finally over, the official gathered his papers with obvious frustration. "You'll need to appear in the capital if this proceeds to formal inquiry." "If it proceeds, I'll be there," Mara said. "But it won't proceed, because there's no case." The official left without responding, taking his guards with him. But not Rowan. Rowan stayed. The room cleared until it was just the two of them and Mrs. Garrett, who lingered by the door like a disapproving chaperone. "You should go with them," Mara said to Rowan, "before they change their minds. I'm not going anywhere. They'll come back with more men and more authority, and next time these people won't be able to stop them. Then we'll deal with that when it happens." "There's no we, Rowan." She was exhausted suddenly, bone-tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical labor. "Don't you understand? This doesn't work. Us. It can't work." "Why not?" "Because you're a duke, and I'm—" She gestured at herself, at the rough dress and ruined hands and the life she'd built from nothing. "I'm this, and those two things can't coexist. They already are coexisting. For how long? Days? Weeks? Before someone else comes? Before the crown demands your return? Before your estate falls apart without you?" She shook her head. "You can play at being a common man, but eventually reality catches up. It always does." "So what are you saying? I should leave?" "I'm saying you should face the truth. You have responsibilities, a position, people depending on you. You can't just abandon all of that." "I can if the alternative is losing you." "You already lost me." The words came out sharp, cutting. 3 years ago, when you chose everyone and everything else over actually seeing me. And you can't fix that by destroying your life now. Rowan flinched. "So that's it? You've decided?" "I decided 3 months ago when I left." "Then why did you let me stay? Why save me on the roof? Why any of this if you'd already made up your mind?" Mara didn't have an answer, or maybe she did, and she just couldn't say it out loud. Mrs. Garrett cleared her throat. "Perhaps you two need more time to—" "No." Mara stood abruptly. "We don't. It's done." She walked out before either of them could respond. Hannah found her an hour later, sitting on the cliff overlooking the ocean. The storm had passed, leaving everything clean and cold and sharp. "You're going to catch your death out here," Hannah said, draping a blanket over Mara's shoulders. "Maybe that would be simpler." "Don't talk like that." They sat in silence for a while, watching waves crash against rocks below. "He's still here," Hannah said finally. "Rowan. He told Mrs. Garrett he's staying until you tell him directly to leave." "I did tell him." "You told him it can't work. That's different from telling him to go." "It amounts to the same thing." "Does it?" Hannah shifted. "Because from where I'm sitting, you both seem to be talking around what you actually want. I want him to stop making this harder than it already is." "And what does he want?" "Me. He wants me." Mara pulled the blanket tighter. "But he can't have me. Not the way things are." "So change the way things are." "That's not how the world works, Hannah." "Maybe it should be." Hannah's voice was gentle but firm. "Look at what happened today. Those people, they stood up for you. Risked trouble with the crown for someone they barely know. Why do you think they did that?" "I don't know. Pity, maybe." "Not pity. Respect." Hannah paused. "You've spent 3 months here being real, being human, not hiding behind titles or manners or any of the things that made you invisible before. And people saw that, recognized it, defended it. Your point? My point is that maybe being a duchess and being yourself don't have to be separate things. Maybe you can be both." "That's naive." "Is it? Or are you just scared to try?" The question hit harder than it should have. Mara thought about the woman she'd been at Halcrest Manor. Silent, accommodating, desperate to please. A ghost in her own life. Then she thought about Mara Thorne. Rough, angry, surviving. More alive in 3 months than she'd been in 3 years. But Hannah was right about one thing. She'd been hiding. First behind the title of Duchess, then behind the false name. Always behind something. What would happen if she stopped hiding? "I need to think," she said. "Think fast," Hannah replied. "Because those officials will be back. And next time, public sentiment might not be enough to stop them." That night, Mara lay awake planning. Not escape this time. Something different. Something that terrified her even more than running had. A fight. Not a physical one. She'd lose that easily. But a different kind of battle. One fought with truth and witnesses, and the one weapon she'd never used before. Her own voice. By morning, she'd made her decision. She found Rowan in the stable, mucking stalls despite his blistered hands. He looked up when she entered, hope and wariness warring on his face. "I need you to do something for me," she said without preamble. "Anything. Don't agree until you hear what it is." He set down the pitchfork. "All right. What?" "I need you to go back to the capital." His face fell. "Mara." "I'm not finished." She took a breath. "I need you to go back and prepare a formal legal separation. Not a divorce. That would take years and destroy both of us. But a separation that gives me independent status and funds." "Why would I do that?" "Because it's the right thing to do. Because it gives me protection. And because—" She paused. "Because I'm coming with you." Rowan went very still. "What?" "I'm coming to the capital, not to hide. Not to go back to being your silent wife. But to stand in front of the court and society and everyone who thinks they know me and tell them exactly what happened, what our marriage was, what you did, what I did, all of it. That would destroy your reputation." "I don't care about my reputation. I care about my child having a future where they're not defined by my mistakes or your name." She met his eyes. "And I care about making sure no one can ever force me back into a life I don't choose." "They'll crucify you." "Let them try." There was steel in her voice now. "I spent 3 years being afraid of what people would think. 3 months running from consequences. I'm done with both. It's time to face this head on." Rowan stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You're serious?" "Completely." "And you want me to help you do this? Even though it will make me look like exactly what you were?" "Yes." She didn't soften it. "I need you to stand beside me and admit the truth. Every ugly piece of it. Can you do that?" He was quiet for a long moment, then, "Yes." "Even if it means losing everything? Your status, your reputation, the respect of your peers? I already lost the only thing that mattered." He looked at her directly. "I'm not going to lose it twice by being a coward." Something shifted between them. Not forgiveness, that would take time, if it came at all, but understanding. Acknowledgement of what they'd both done and failed to do. "When do we leave?" Rowan asked. 3 days? I need to settle things here, say goodbye properly." "And after? After the legal separation?" "I don't know." Mara's hand moved to her stomach. "I haven't thought that far ahead. Can I—" He stopped, then started again. "Can I be part of it? The baby's life? Even if we're not together?" "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you can actually be the man you've been pretending to be these past few days. Not for 3 days. Not for 3 months. Forever." She held his gaze. "Can you do that?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I want to try." It wasn't a promise. Wasn't a guarantee. But it was honest. And honesty was more than she'd ever gotten from him before. The next 3 days were chaos. Mrs. Garrett tried to talk Mara out of leaving, then gave up and helped her prepare instead. The townspeople offered what little they could spare. Extra clothes, a bit of money, words of encouragement that made Mara's throat tight. "You come back if it doesn't work," Mrs. Garrett said the night before they left. "There's always a place for you here." "Thank you." Mara hugged her, this rough woman who'd given her a chance when she had nothing. "For everything." "Don't thank me yet. You're about to walk into a lion's den." "I know." "Good. Means you're not stupid, just brave." Mrs. Garrett pulled back, her eyes sharp. "And keep that Duke of yours in line. He's been useless his whole life. Time he learned what real work looks like." Rowan, standing nearby, had the grace to look chagrined. Hannah was the hardest goodbye. They'd been through everything together. The planning, the escape, the months of survival. "Come with us," Mara said. "Please?" "No." Hannah shook her head. "This is your fight now. Yours and his. I'd just be in the way." "You're never in the way." "I am for this." Hannah smiled, though her eyes were wet. "But I'll be here when you get back. If you get back." "When?" Mara corrected. "Not if." They held each other for a long moment. Two women who'd started as lady and servant and become something far more important, friends. The journey to the capital took 5 days. They traveled by coach, Rowan paying for private compartments that gave them space to talk, or not talk. Mostly, they didn't talk. But on the third day, as they rolled through countryside Mara recognized from her youth, Rowan finally broke the silence. "I've been thinking about what you said, about being the man I've been pretending to be." Mara looked up from the book she'd been staring at without reading. "I don't know if I can," he continued. "Be that man, I mean. Not all the time. I'm going to fail, make mistakes, fall back into old patterns. I know. But I want you to call me on it, when I do. Don't let me slide back into being," he gestured vaguely, "him, the person I was. That's not my job. No. But maybe it could be our agreement. We hold each other accountable. You stop me from being a bastard. I stop you from disappearing into yourself." He paused. "Partners. Real ones." "We're not partners, Rowan. We're barely even speaking to each other." "Not yet. But maybe we could be, eventually, if we both work at it." Mara wanted to say no, wanted to keep the walls up, protect herself from the inevitable disappointment, but something Hannah had said kept echoing in her mind. "Maybe you can be both." "All right," she said finally. "We can try. But Rowan, if you hurt me again, there won't be a fourth chance." "I understand. I mean it. One more betrayal and I'm gone, completely. You'll never see me or this child again." "I understand," he repeated. "And I won't. Hurt you again, I mean. I'll probably fail at a lot of things, but not that." It should have felt like a promise. Instead, it felt like a beginning, tentative and fragile, but real. The capital appeared on the horizon on the 5th day. Tall buildings, crowded streets, the bustle and noise that Mara had once found exciting and now just found exhausting. "Are you ready?" Rowan asked as their coach rattled through the outskirts. "No." Mara straightened her dress. One of the better ones Mrs. Garrett had helped her acquire. Still nothing like the silk and lace she used to wear, but clean and respectable. "But I'm doing it anyway." They went directly to Rowan's solicitor, a sharp-eyed man named Pemberton, who looked like he'd swallowed something sour when they walked in together. "Your Grace," he said, not even acknowledging Mara. "We'd heard you'd returned. The summons from the Crown requires—" "The summons can wait," Rowan interrupted. "We have other business first." "Other business?" "A legal separation. I need the documents drawn up immediately." Pemberton's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "Your Grace, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No. Whatever needs to be said can be said in front of my wife." "Very well." Pemberton's tone suggested it was anything but. "A legal separation is possible, though highly irregular. It would require grounds, abandonment, cruelty, adultery." "All of the above," Rowan said flatly. "On my part." The room went silent. "Your Grace," Pemberton said carefully, "admitting to such things in a legal document would be the truth, which is what we're doing." Rowan looked at Mara. "Right?" She nodded. "The truth. All of it." Pemberton looked between them like they'd lost their minds. "This will destroy your standing, both of you. The scandal alone—" "Let it," Mara said. "I'm done caring about scandal." "But the child—" "Will inherit everything," Rowan interrupted. "That's non-negotiable. Regardless of our marital status, the child is my heir. Full rights, full inheritance, no questions. The other families will object. They'll claim illegitimacy, try to contest." "Let them try." Rowan's voice was cold. "I'll fight them on every point. Use every legal resource available. This child will be protected." Pemberton stared at him. "You're serious?" Completely. Then you're a fool. You're throwing away centuries of legacy for... He caught himself, but not before Mara saw the contempt in his eyes. For her, Rowan finished. Yes, and for our child, and for the chance to actually be someone worth respecting. Respectability isn't earned through scandal, Your Grace. No, but maybe honor is. The documents took 3 days to prepare. During that time, word spread through the capital like wildfire. The missing Duchess had returned. The Duke was seeking separation. Something scandalous was happening. Invitations stopped coming. Former friends crossed the street to avoid them. Doors that had always been open suddenly closed. Mara had expected it to hurt. Instead, she felt oddly free. You're smiling, Rowan observed one evening as they reviewed the legal papers. Am I? Yes. Why? Because I just realized I don't care what they think anymore. Any of them. She looked at the papers, at the formal language detailing every failure of their marriage. This is terrifying, but it's also mine, my choice, my truth. Our truth, Rowan corrected gently. Our truth, she agreed. The hearing was set for the following week. It would be private, just the magistrate, their solicitors, and required witnesses. But Rowan had other plans. I want it public, he told Pemberton. That's madness. The humiliation alone is the point. Rowan looked at Mara. We're not hiding anymore, either of us. Let them see exactly what happened. Let them judge us based on truth instead of rumor. They'll crucify you, Pemberton warned. Probably. Rowan didn't look away from Mara, but at least they'll do it for the right reasons. Mara felt something crack open in her chest. Not love, not yet, maybe not ever again, but respect, recognition, the understanding that he meant it, all of it. Public, she agreed. Let them see. The hearing was scheduled for the main courthouse. Word spread immediately, and by the day of, the gallery was packed. Nobles, merchants, common folk, everyone wanted to witness the spectacle. Mara wore the simplest dress she owned. No jewelry except her mother's necklace, the one piece she'd refused to sell. Her hair was pulled back simply, her face free of powder or paint. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who'd survived. Rowan sat beside her, his face calm but his hands clenched tight on his knees. The magistrate, an elderly man with kind eyes, called the hearing to order. This is highly unusual, he began. A public hearing for a separation, but as both parties have requested it, we'll proceed. Duke Halcrest, you're petitioning for legal separation from your wife on grounds of your own misconduct? Yes, Your Honor. That's not typically how these things work. I'm aware, but it's the truth. The magistrate looked at Mara. And you, Duchess Halcrest? You agree to these terms? I do, Your Honor, with the addition that I retain full custody of our child and independent financial support. Murmurs ran through the gallery. Very well. The magistrate reviewed the papers. The grounds listed here are extensive. Adultery, emotional cruelty, negligence. Duke Halcrest, you admit to all of these? I do. Why? The simple question hung in the air. Rowan stood. He didn't have to. It wasn't required, but he did anyway. Because I was a coward, he said, his voice carrying through the silent courtroom. I married a good woman and treated her like property. I broke every vow I made. And when she finally found the strength to leave, I tried to force her back instead of examining why she'd run in the first place. The crowd was absolutely silent. I don't deserve her forgiveness, Rowan continued. I probably don't deserve this chance to make things even partially right, but I'm asking for it anyway. Because the alternative, pretending everything was fine, maintaining appearances, continuing the lie, that's what cowards do. And I'm done being a coward. He sat down. The magistrate stared at him for a long moment. Duchess Halcrest, do you have anything to add? Mara stood, her legs shaking but her voice steady. I spent 3 years trying to be perfect, she said. Trying to earn love I was promised but never received. I made myself small, quiet, invisible, and it almost destroyed me. She looked out at the crowd, at all the faces she recognized from balls and dinners and meaningless social functions. I ran because I had to. Because staying meant dying slowly, and I'd rather survive roughly than perish politely. She paused. This separation isn't about punishing my husband. It's about establishing that I exist, that I have value beyond my title or his name, that my child will grow up knowing they're worth more than their legacy. The crowd erupted, some applauding, some shouting objections, everyone talking at once. The magistrate banged his gavel. Order! Order in this court! When silence finally returned, he looked at both of them with something that might have been respect. These are extraordinary circumstances, he said. An extraordinary honesty. I'm granting the separation with all terms as stated. Duchess Halcrest retains custody and financial independence. The child is recognized as legitimate heir, and both parties are free to live as they choose. More uproar, but Mara barely heard it. It was done. She was free. Actually, legally, undeniably free. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Some hostile, some curious, some, surprisingly, supportive. "You did the right thing," a woman called out. Mara recognized her vaguely, Lady something, a minor noble. "My husband treats me the same way. I wish I had your courage." Others echoed similar sentiments. Not everyone, not even most. But enough that Mara realized something. She wasn't alone in this. Other women lived in similar cages. Other women were watching to see if escape was possible. She'd just shown them it was. Rowan appeared beside her, and together they walked through the crowd toward the waiting carriage. "What happens now?" he asked. "I don't know," Mara admitted. "I haven't planned past today." "Can I make a suggestion?" "Depends on the suggestion." "There's a house on the edge of the city. Small. Nothing like the manor, but comfortable. Private. It's been empty for years." He paused. "I could sign it over to you, give you a place to stay while you figure out what comes next." "Why would you do that?" "Because you need somewhere safe, and because—" He struggled for words. "Because I want to prove I mean it. All of it, not with words, with actions." Mara looked at him. This man who'd been her husband, her jailer, her nightmare, who was now trying, however clumsily, to be something different. "All right," she said. "Show me the house." It was small, like he'd said, but it had windows that let in light and rooms that felt lived in rather than displayed. There was a garden, overgrown but salvageable, a kitchen that actually looked used. "It was my mother's," Rowan said quietly, "before she married my father. Her escape, she used to call it." "Did she escape?" "Not enough." He looked around the dusty rooms. "But maybe you can." Mara walked through the space, imagining it filled with her things, her child, her life. Not perfect, not grand, but hers. "I'll take it," she said. Rowan's relief was visible. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. This doesn't fix everything." "I know. We're not reconciled. We're barely civil to each other." "I know that too. But—" She paused at a window overlooking the garden. "But maybe we can build something new. Not a marriage. Not what we had. Something neither of us has a name for yet. I'd like that." They stood in the empty house, two people who'd destroyed each other learning to rebuild. It wasn't forgiveness. Wasn't even healing yet. But it was a start. And sometimes a start was enough. The house took 3 weeks to become livable. Mara scrubbed floors herself, refused to hire servants, despite Rowan's protests, and slowly transformed the dusty rooms into something resembling home. She hung curtains, planted herbs in the overgrown garden, found a carpenter to fix the broken stairs. Rowan appeared every morning at 8, carrying supplies or tools or whatever he thought might be useful. Sometimes she let him help. Sometimes she sent him away. "You're being stubborn," he said one morning, watching her struggle with a bucket of water that was clearly too heavy for a pregnant woman to carry. "I'm being independent." "Those aren't the same thing." "They are for me." She set the bucket down, breathing hard. "I need to know I can do this alone, that I'm not dependent on you or anyone else. You're 5 months pregnant. There's no shame in accepting help. There is when it means going back to how things were. You providing, me accepting, the balance always tipped in your favor." Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up a second bucket. "What if we both carry water, equal weight, equal work? That's not how it works in the real world. Maybe it should be." She wanted to argue, but he was already filling his bucket from the well. They carried water together in silence, making 3 trips before the cistern was full. "Thank you," Mara said, grudgingly. "You're welcome." He paused at the gate. "I'm staying at an inn across town. If you need anything—"
I won't. But if you do, I'll manage. She softened slightly. But I appreciate the offer. He left, and Mara stood in her garden watching the sun set over the city. Her city now. Her life. Strange how terrifying and exhilarating that felt in equal measure.
Hannah arrived 2 weeks later, appearing on the doorstep with a trunk and a determined expression. "I got bored," she announced. "Brincliffe is dreary without you." "Liar." Mara pulled her into a hug. "You came to check on me." "That too." Hannah stepped inside, looking around with approval. "This is nice, smaller than the manor, but it feels more like a home." "That's the idea." They fell back into old rhythms. Hannah cooking, Mara organizing, both of them talking late into the night about everything and nothing. It felt right. Normal in a way Mara's life had never been before. "He's been here every day, hasn't he?" Hannah asked one evening, noting the extra tools in the shed, the repaired fence, the firewood stacked neatly by the door. "He helps." "That's progress." "It's not enough." "Didn't say it was." "But it's something." Hannah poured tea, studying Mara's face. "Are you happy?" The question caught Mara off guard. "I don't know. I'm existing, surviving, building something. Is that the same as happy?" "Probably not, but it might be the foundation for it. Very philosophical of you." "I've had time to think." Hannah smiled. "Turns out running away from your old life gives you perspective." "Any regrets?" "Only that I didn't do it sooner." They clinked teacups in a toast to that. The first real challenge came 6 weeks after the hearing. A formal summons arrived, delivered by a crown messenger who looked deeply uncomfortable with his task. "What is it?" Hannah asked, watching Mara's face pale as she read. "The court is challenging the separation. Several noble families have filed objections, claiming the terms are," she scanned the legal language, "prejudicial to established social order and dangerous precedent for marital dissolution." "Can they do that?" "Apparently." Mara's hands shook. "There's going to be another hearing, a full review of the terms, and if they overturn it, they won't." "You don't know that." "No, but I know you won't let them." Hannah took the summons, reading it more carefully. "When is it?" 3 weeks? Then we have 3 weeks to prepare." "For what?" "They have the law on their side. Centuries of precedent. I have—" Mara gestured helplessly. "Nothing. Just the truth, and nobody cares about that." "The people in Brincliffe cared. The ones at the courthouse cared." Hannah set the papers down. "You're not nothing, Mara, and your truth matters. We just need to make sure everyone hears it." That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She paced the small house, her hand on her swollen belly, thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. They could revoke the separation, force her back to the manor, take her child the moment it was born, and give it to Rowan to raise properly, with appropriate supervision. The thought made her physically ill. Around midnight, there was a knock on the door. Mara opened it to find Rowan standing in the rain. "I heard," he said without preamble, "about the challenge. News travels fast. Can I come in?" She shouldn't let him. It was late, improper, exactly the kind of thing that would fuel more gossip, but she was tired and scared, and he looked almost as wrecked as she felt. "Fine, but just for a minute." He stepped inside, dripping water on her clean floors. "I'm going to fight this." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not letting them undo what we worked for." He ran his hand through his wet hair. "They're doing this because they're afraid. Afraid that if you can break free, other women will too. Afraid of losing control." "Then they've already won. They have the control, the power, the law." "They have tradition. That's not the same as being right." He looked at her directly. "And I'll stand up in that courtroom and say so, publicly, repeatedly, until they understand that this isn't about us anymore. It's about every woman trapped in a marriage like ours was." "That's a pretty speech. Won't change anything." "Maybe not, but at least I'll have tried." He paused. "And maybe together we can make them listen." "Together, if you'll let me." His voice was quiet. "Not as your husband, not as someone with authority over you, just as someone who wants the same thing you do, freedom to choose." Mara studied him. 6 months ago, this man had been a stranger wearing her husband's face. 3 months ago, he'd been the enemy. Now he was something else, something undefined. All right, she said, together. But Rowan, if you back down, if you compromise, if you put your reputation above this, I won't.
You don't know that. Yes, I do.
He met her eyes. Because I've already lost everything that mattered. My pride, my reputation, the respect of my peers. All I have left is the chance to do one thing right. I'm not throwing that away. He left before she could respond, disappearing back into the rain. Hannah appeared at the top of the stairs. Did I hear what I think I heard? That depends on what you think you heard. That your impossible husband might actually be becoming a decent human being. Don't get ahead of yourself. But Mara was smiling despite herself. He's trying, that's all. Sometimes trying is enough. The next 3 weeks were brutal. Rowan hired the best lawyers money could buy, but they all said the same thing. The challenge had merit. The terms of the separation were unprecedented. If the court wanted to overturn them, they had grounds. So we make new grounds, Mara said during one particularly frustrating strategy session. The lead lawyer, a sharp woman named Caroline Thress, who'd shocked everyone by taking the case, looked interested. What do you mean? I mean we stop defending on their terms, stop arguing precedent and law and tradition. Instead, we put the system itself on trial. That's not how courts work.
Then maybe it should be. Mara stood, pacing. They want to argue that my separation threatens social order? Fine. Let's talk about what kind of social order they're defending. One where women are property, where abuse is acceptable as long as it's private, where speaking truth is punished and silence is rewarded. That would be inflammatory, Caroline warned. The magistrate might shut you down immediately.
Or he might listen, because even magistrates have wives and daughters. Even they might wonder if the world they're defending is worth preserving. Rowan, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. She's right. We've been playing their game. Time to change the rules. You can't just change the rules of law, Caroline protested.
Why not? They did. Centuries ago, some group of men sat down and decided how marriage would work, how women would be treated, how power would be distributed. If they could make those rules, we can challenge them. Caroline stared at them both like they'd lost their minds. Then, slowly, she smiled. This is either brilliant or career suicide. Probably both, Mara agreed. Are you in?
Against my better judgment? Yes. But we need testimony, evidence. Not just your story, but others. Women willing to stand up and say this isn't an isolated case. I know women, Mara said quietly. Women who approached me after the first hearing, women living similar situations. The question is whether they'll risk speaking publicly. Only one way to find out, Hannah said. Ask them. Mara spent the next 2 weeks doing exactly that. She visited women she'd known from her time as Duchess, society wives who'd always seemed perfectly content. Behind closed doors, their stories spilled out. Infidelity, cruelty, being treated as decorative objects or breeding stock, silent suffering hidden behind perfect manners. Not all of them would testify. Most were too afraid of the consequences. But 5 women, 5 brave, terrified women, agreed to stand with her. This is going to be ugly, one of them said, Lady Elizabeth Caro, married to a viscount with a vicious temper. They'll destroy our reputations. They'll try, Mara agreed, but reputation and truth aren't the same thing, and I'm done choosing reputation. Easy for you to say. You've already lost yours. Exactly, which means I have nothing left to lose. But you do. So if you want to back out, I don't. Elizabeth's voice was firm. I'm tired of being afraid, tired of pretending everything is fine when it's not. If there's a chance, even a small one, that this might change things, I want to take it. The other women nodded in agreement. The hearing was scheduled for early December. Winter had settled over the capital, bringing cold rain and early darkness. Mara was 7 months pregnant now, her belly prominent, her body aching with the weight of carrying life. You should sit, Caroline said as they entered the courthouse. You're pregnant. No one expects you to stand through this. I'll stand, Mara said. I want them to see me, really see me, not just a duchess or a legal case, a pregnant woman fighting for her child's future. The courtroom was even more packed than before. Word had spread about what they were planning, and everyone wanted to witness it. The 5 women who'd agreed to testify sat in the front row, visible and vulnerable. The magistrate, a different one this time, younger, with shrewd eyes, called the hearing to order. This court has been asked to review the separation agreement between Duke Rowan Halcrest and Duchess Elara Halcrest, specifically regarding claims that the terms are prejudicial and set dangerous precedent. He looked at the lawyers. Who speaks for the objectors? A man stood, Lord Ashford, representing the coalition of noble families. His voice dripped with condescension. Your Honor, this separation threatens the very foundation of social order. If we allow wives to simply leave their marriages, claim independent funds, and retain custody of children based solely on accusations of misconduct, we undermine centuries of law. Accusations? Mara's voice rang out before anyone could stop her. They're not accusations, they're admissions. My husband admitted to everything. Duchess Halcrest, the magistrate said, not unkindly, you'll have your turn to speak. Will I? Because last time I checked, these proceedings weren't about whether what happened to me was true. They're about whether I'm allowed to escape it. Murmurs ran through the gallery. Nevertheless, the magistrate continued, protocol requires women to stay silent while men debate our lives. Mara stepped forward, her hands on her belly. But I'm done being silent, and before you tell me to sit down and wait my turn, ask yourself, if this was your daughter, would you want her to have the choice I'm fighting for? The courtroom went dead quiet. The magistrate studied her for a long moment. You make a compelling point. Very well. State your case. Mara took a breath. This was it. The moment everything either changed or collapsed completely. My case is simple, she began. For 3 years, I was married to a man who treated me like furniture, who had affairs openly, who made it clear my only value was producing an heir, and the law protected him. Gave him authority over my body, my money, my entire existence. She gestured to the women in the front row. I'm not unique. These women, and countless others, live the same reality. The only difference is I had the resources to escape. They don't. So when you decide whether my separation stands, you're not just deciding my fate. You're deciding whether any woman has the right to choose freedom over suffering. Lord Ashford stood. Your Honor, this is emotional manipulation. The law is not built on feelings. The law is built on the backs of women who had no choice in making it, Mara interrupted. Men decided how marriage works, how divorce works, how custody works, and they decided in their own favor every time. That's not... It is. She turned to the magistrate. You want precedent? Here it is. Every law protecting men's rights over women. Every statute giving husbands authority over wives. Every tradition treating us like property. That's your precedent, and I'm asking you to set a new one. Rowan stood. If I may add, you may not, Lord Ashford snapped. You're the defendant. Your opinion is irrelevant. My opinion is the most relevant thing here, Rowan shot back, because I'm the one who did this, who broke her, who treated my wife like she didn't matter. And I'm telling you, the system that allowed me to do that is broken. You're betraying your entire class, Ashford hissed. I'm telling the truth. There's a difference. The magistrate banged his gavel. Gentlemen and ladies, this is a court of law, not a public forum for social debate. Isn't it, though? Caroline stood, her voice sharp and clear. Because these noble families didn't challenge this separation on legal grounds. They challenged it because it scares them. Because if one woman can break free, others will follow. And that threatens their power. That's speculation. Is it? Then let me present evidence. Caroline gestured, and the 5 women stood. These women have agreed to testify about their own marriages, their own experiences. If the court is truly interested in justice, you'll hear them. This is highly irregular, the magistrate said, but he didn't shut them down. Very well, let the witnesses speak. One by one, they did. Elizabeth Caro talked about her husband's violence. Lady Margaret Sims described years of infidelity and humiliation. Lady Diane Worth spoke of being isolated from family, cut off from any support. Each story was different in details but identical in substance. Women trapped, suffering, with no legal recourse. The gallery was silent. Even Lord Ashford seemed shaken. When the last woman finished, Mara spoke again. You asked for precedent, for legal grounds. Here they are. Every one of these women deserves the same protection I'm asking for, the same right to leave, the same independence. She paused. And if you deny me, deny us, you're saying explicitly that marriage is more important than safety, that tradition matters more than truth, that women don't have the right to choose their own lives. That's not what we're saying, Ashford protested weakly. Then what are you saying? That some abuse is acceptable? That women should endure as long as their husbands maintain appearances? Tell me, where's the line? How much suffering is enough to justify freedom? No one answered. The magistrate looked deeply uncomfortable. This court will take a brief recess to consider the arguments. They filed out into the cold hallway. Mara's legs were shaking, her back screaming from standing so long. Hannah appeared with a chair, and Mara collapsed into it gratefully. That was incredible, Elizabeth said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I've never heard anyone speak like that, so directly. It might not be enough, Mara warned, but it was something. For the first time, someone said out loud what we've all been thinking. Rowan approached carefully. That was brave. It was necessary. Same thing sometimes. He crouched down so they were eye level. Whatever happens, I want you to know. I'm proud of you. Not as your husband, just as someone who's watched you become the person you were always meant to be. The words should have felt patronizing. Instead, they landed like validation. Thank you, Mara said quietly. The recess lasted 2 hours. When they were called back in, the magistrate looked tired. This court has heard compelling arguments on both sides, he began. The law is clear about marital obligations. But the law is also not static. It evolves as society evolves. And what this court has heard today suggests that our current laws regarding marriage and separation are insufficient. Mara held her breath. Therefore, the magistrate continued, I am upholding the original separation agreement with all its terms intact. Furthermore, I am recommending to the Crown that similar cases be reviewed with an eye toward establishing clear protections for women in untenable marriages. The courtroom erupted. Cheers from some, outrage from others, complete chaos. Mara sat frozen, not quite believing it. We won, Hannah breathed. Mara, we actually won. Not just won, Caroline said, reading the magistrate's written order. He's recommending law reform. This could change everything. Rowan caught Mara's eye across the room. He didn't smile. This wasn't a moment for celebration, not really, but there was something in his expression, respect, acknowledgement, maybe even hope. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Some were hostile, angry nobles shouting about tradition and proper order, but others were supportive. Women mostly, some with bruises hidden under powder, some just looking tired and desperate. One approached Mara directly, young, maybe 20, with frightened eyes. Is it true? She asked. Can we really leave? Just leave? It's not easy, Mara said honestly. It's terrifying and difficult and you lose almost everything. But yes, you can leave. What if I have nowhere to go? Mara looked at her small house visible in the distance, at Hannah standing beside her, at the impossible life they'd built from nothing. You find somewhere, she said, or you build it yourself. But either way, you don't stay where you're not valued. The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face, and disappeared into the crowd. More women approached with similar questions. Mara answered each one, her voice growing hoarse but never wavering. This was bigger than her now, bigger than one separation or one victory. It was permission, for all of them. The weeks after the hearing were strange. The law didn't change overnight. Caroline had warned them it would take years if it happened at all. But something shifted in the capital. Women started asking questions, seeking counsel. A few even filed for separations of their own. Not many. Most were still too afraid, too dependent, too indoctrinated into believing this was just how life worked. But enough that people noticed. You've started something, Rowan said one evening. He'd taken to visiting weekly, always bringing something useful, supplies, news, occasionally just company. I didn't start it, just gave it voice. Same thing. They were sitting in Mara's garden, now cleared and planted with winter vegetables. The baby kicked, and Mara winced. Can I? Rowan asked, gesturing to her belly. She hesitated, then nodded. He placed his hand carefully, reverently. When the baby kicked again, his expression transformed into something Mara had never seen before. Pure, unguarded wonder. That's our child, he said softly. My child, Mara corrected gently. Legally, remember? Right, of course. He didn't remove his hand, though. Can I ask you something? When the baby comes, and I know I don't have rights, I know the separation gives you full custody,
But could I be part of it? Not as a father with authority, just as someone who wants to know them? Mara had been expecting this question, had been dreading it, honestly. I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to say no. Keep you away. Protect this child from any possibility of you hurting them, like you hurt me. I understand. But another part, she paused, choosing words carefully. Another part recognizes that you're trying. Actually trying, not just performing. And maybe that deserves something. What does that mean? It means I won't shut you out completely, but you'll have to earn trust. Prove you're serious about being different. How long will that take? However long it takes. Maybe months, maybe years, maybe forever. She looked at him directly. I don't have an answer, Rowan. We're in uncharted territory here. Fair enough. He pulled his hand back. I can live with uncertain. It's better than nothing. The baby came early, in the middle of a snowstorm in January. Hannah sent for the midwife while Mara labored in her small bedroom, cursing and sweating and wondering why women did this more than once. You're doing well, the midwife said, which Mara knew was a lie because everything hurt and nothing was well. Don't patronize me. Wouldn't dream of it, Duchess. Don't call me that either. 16 hours. That's how long it took. 16 hours of pain and fear and Hannah holding her hand through all of it. And then, finally, a cry. It's a girl, the midwife announced, placing a tiny, angry, perfect creature on Mara's chest. Mara looked down at her daughter and felt something shift in her universe. This small person, red-faced and squalling, was hers, only hers. No one could take her, control her, claim her as property. She's beautiful, Hannah whispered, tears streaming down her face. She's mine, Mara said, and started crying too. They named her Isabel, after Mara's mother. No traditional Halcrest name, no nod to legacy or lineage, just a name Mara loved. Rowan came to visit 3 days later, bearing gifts and looking terrified. Can I see her? He asked from the doorway. Mara hesitated, then nodded. Briefly. He approached like Isabel was made of glass. When Mara placed her in his arms, his expression crumbled completely. She's perfect, he managed. She's colicky and she doesn't sleep, Mara corrected. But yes, she's perfect. Rowan held his daughter for maybe 5 minutes before Isabel started fussing and Mara took her back. But in those 5 minutes, Mara saw something that gave her hope. Genuine love. Not possession, not pride in producing an heir, just a father looking at his child with wonder. Maybe it would be enough. Maybe it wouldn't. Time would tell. Spring came slowly to the capital. By March, Mara's small house had become a kind of sanctuary. Women came seeking advice, support, sometimes just a safe place to think. Hannah managed the visitors while Mara cared for Isabel and recovered from the birth. Caroline visited regularly, bringing news of legal developments. 3 more separation petitions had been filed, all using Mara's case as precedent. The Crown had established a committee to review marriage law, though no one expected quick results. You've made history, Caroline said one afternoon, watching Isabel sleep. You know that, right? I just wanted to escape my marriage, and in doing so showed others how to escape theirs. That's revolution, Mara. That's a big word for someone who just wanted to survive. Sometimes surviving is revolutionary. Rowan had settled into a pattern, visiting once a week, always bringing something for Isabel, never staying long. He'd moved permanently to his mother's old house across the city and was, by all accounts, living simply. No lavish parties, no mistresses, no maintaining the lifestyle expected of a duke. People talk, he told Mara during one visit. Say I've gone mad, given up my position for some woman. Have you? Given up my position? Partially? Gone mad? He smiled slightly. Probably, but it's a better kind of mad than I was before. What are you doing with your time? Working, mostly. I've been consulting with the Committee on Marriage Law Reform, using my position, what's left of it, to push for actual changes. He paused. And I've been writing about what happened, what I did, hoping that if other men read it, maybe they'll recognize themselves before it's too late. Will you publish it? I don't know. Maybe, if you're all right with it. The fact that he asked, that he considered her permission necessary, was growth. Publish it, Mara said.
If it helps even one person, it's worth it. 6 months after Isabel's birth, something unexpected happened. Mara received an invitation to speak at the Women's College, a formal lecture on marriage, independence, and legal reform. "They want me to speak?" she asked Caroline, staring at the invitation. "To students? You're famous, or infamous, depending on who's asking. But yes, they want your perspective." "I'm not a scholar. I don't have credentials or—" "You have experience. That's worth more." Mara accepted, despite her terror. Hannah agreed to watch Isabel, and Mara stood in front of a room full of young women and told her story. Not the sanitized version, the real one, with all its failures and fears and messy, complicated truth. The girls listened with rapt attention. Afterward, they asked questions that ranged from practical to philosophical. How do you know when to leave? What if you have no money? Is it wrong to want both love and independence? Can marriage ever be equal? Mara answered honestly, admitting when she didn't know, sharing what she'd learned. One girl, maybe 18, with fierce eyes, stood up. "My mother stayed in a terrible marriage her entire life. She told me it was duty, that women endure. But listening to you, I realize she didn't have to. She just thought she did." "A lot of women think that," Mara said gently, "because that's what we're taught. But you're teaching something different. I'm just telling you the truth. What you do with it is up to you." The lecture became a regular thing. Once a month, Mara returned to speak, and each time the room got more crowded. Word spread. More invitations came. From other colleges, from women's groups, even from some progressive members of parliament. Mara, who'd spent 3 years being invisible, was now one of the most visible women in the capital. "How does it feel?" Rowan asked during one of his visits. Isabel was 8 months old now, babbling and attempting to crawl. Terrifying, exhilarating, both at once. "You're good at it, speaking, leading. I'm just being honest." That's what makes it powerful. He watched Isabel grab at his fingers. "She's going to grow up in a different world than you did, partly because you're changing it. The world's not changed yet. We're just making noise. Noise that people are hearing." It was true. The Marriage Law Committee had proposed reforms, limited but real. Women would have more rights to property, more ability to seek separation in cases of abuse, more legal standing in custody disputes. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But more than before. And that was something. A year after the hearing, Mara made a decision. She organized a gathering at her house. All the women who'd testified, plus others who'd found courage through their example. 20 women crammed into her small parlor, drinking tea and talking openly about their lives. "We should formalize this," Elizabeth suggested. "Create an actual organization, resources for women seeking separation, legal aid, safe housing." "That would cost money," someone pointed out. "I have money," Mara said. The settlement from her separation had been substantial, and she'd been careful with it. "And I'm willing to invest it in this." "As am I," another voice said. They all turned to see Rowan standing in the doorway. "If you'll accept help from someone who used to be part of the problem." Mara wanted to refuse. This was supposed to be separate from him, independent of his influence or money. But pragmatism won out. "All right, but no strings, no control. You fund, we direct." Agreed. The organization, they called it the Women's Sanctuary League, launched 3 months later. It started small, a few rooms in a rented building, one legal advisor, basic resources. But it grew. Women came seeking help, and the league provided it. Shelter, counsel, legal representation, job training. It wasn't perfect. Funding was always tight. The legal system fought them at every turn. Society still viewed them with suspicion or outright hostility. But it existed. And that mattered. Isabel's first birthday fell on a crisp autumn day. Mara threw a small party, just Hannah, Caroline, a few of the women from the league. Rowan came too, bringing an elaborate wooden toy he'd clearly spent weeks making. "You didn't have to," Mara said. "I wanted to." He set it down, watching Isabel immediately crawl toward it. "I may not be her father in the traditional sense, but I'd like to be part of her life. However, you'll allow." Mara had been thinking about this. A year of watching Rowan show up consistently, work genuinely, change gradually. It wasn't forgiveness. She still didn't know if she could forgive him completely. But it was acknowledgement, I want to propose something, she said. A formal arrangement. You can see Isabel regularly, be involved in her upbringing, but on equal terms. You don't get to override my decisions or claim authority. We discuss, compromise, decide together. Co-parenting, Rowan said, even though we're not married. Exactly. I'd like that, very much. They shook hands on it, and Mara realized something. This was what partnership looked like. Not romance, not traditional marriage, just two people working together toward a common goal. It wasn't what she'd imagined when she'd stood in that cathedral 3 years ago, promising to love and honor a stranger. But it was real, honest, built on respect rather than obligation, and that made it stronger than any vow. 2 years after the hearing, Mara stood in Parliament at the invitation of the Reform Committee. The proposed marriage laws were up for final vote, and they wanted testimony from women who'd lived under the old system. The chamber was packed, lords and commons, activists and aristocrats, everyone who had an opinion on whether women deserved basic rights in marriage. Mara approached the speaker's podium, her heart pounding. She'd spoken to crowds before, but never like this. Never with this much at stake. Members of Parliament, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. I'm here to tell you about my marriage, not the version you think you know from gossip or speculation. The truth. She laid it out methodically. The isolation, the infidelity, the complete lack of legal recourse, her escape and survival. The fight to keep her child and her independence. The laws you're voting on won't fix everything, she continued. They're small steps toward equity, not giant leaps, but they're necessary steps. Because right now, marriage law treats women like property. And property can't choose freedom. A few members shifted uncomfortably. Good. She wanted them uncomfortable. Some of you will vote against these reforms because you believe in tradition. You'll say marriage has worked this way for centuries, and you're right, it has. But ask yourselves, worked for whom? Because it hasn't worked for the women trapped in abusive situations with no legal escape. It hasn't worked for the children raised in homes filled with resentment and fear. It certainly hasn't worked for me. She paused, letting that sink in. This vote is about more than law. It's about acknowledging that women are human beings with rights equal to men, that we deserve agency over our own lives, that marriage should be partnership, not ownership. She looked directly at the members. And if you can't support that, if you truly believe women are lesser, then history will remember you accordingly. The chamber erupted in applause and protest in equal measure. The vote happened that afternoon. The reforms passed. Narrowly, but they passed. Outside Parliament, a crowd had gathered. When Mara emerged, they cheered. Not everyone. Some shouted insults, but the cheers were louder. Rowan was waiting at the edge of the crowd. He'd attended the session but stayed back, letting her have the spotlight. You did it, he said when she reached him. We did it. Mara gestured to the women around her, the activists who'd fought for years. All of us. Fair enough, he smiled. Isabel's going to be proud when she's old enough to understand. She better be. I'm doing this for her, for all the daughters who deserve better than what we had. They walked home together through the celebrating crowd, two people who'd destroyed each other learning to build something new from the ruins. It wasn't a fairy tale, wasn't happily ever after in any traditional sense, but it was real, true, earned through pain and growth and the slow, difficult work of becoming better. And that made it beautiful. 5 years after the hearing, Mara stood in the garden of the house Rowan had given her, now truly hers in every sense, and watched Isabel play. 5 years old, fearless, asking constant questions about why things worked the way they did. Hannah was getting married next month to a carpenter she'd met through the Sanctuary League. Caroline had been appointed to a government position overseeing family law. The League had expanded to 5 cities. Rowan lived nearby and saw Isabel 3 times a week. They'd developed a rhythm, not perfect, still occasionally tense, but functional. He'd published his memoir 2 years ago, and it had shocked society by being brutally honest about his failures. Some people never forgave him for airing such private matters. Others saw it as accountability. Mara saw it as growth. "Mama," Isabel called, "why can't I climb that tree?" "Because you'll fall." "But what if I don't?" "Then you'll still probably fall eventually." Isabel considered this logic. "But I want to try anyway." Mara looked at her daughter, stubborn, curious, completely unafraid, and smiled.
All right, but be careful.
She watched Isabel scramble up the tree, thought about her own life, the risks she'd taken, the falls and climbs, and everything between. Maybe that was the lesson. Not that you could avoid falling, but that you could get back up afterward, build something new, choose differently, and teach your daughter to climb despite the risk, because living scared wasn't living at all. Rowan appeared at the garden gate. Am I early?
Right on time, Mara gestured to Isabel in the tree. Your daughter's testing gravity. She gets that from you. Probably. They stood together, watching. I've been thinking about something. What's that? The League needs a permanent building, somewhere larger, more stable. I have most of the funding, but not quite enough. How much do you need? She told him. His eyebrows rose. That's substantial.
I know. And I know I said no strings when you fund things, but this is big enough that I wanted to be transparent. Yes?
Mara stopped.
Yes? Yes, I'll fund it. No strings, no control. He smiled slightly. You've proven you know what you're doing. I'm just providing resources. Thank you. Don't thank me. It's Isabel's inheritance I'm spending. She should grow up knowing her father did at least one truly good thing. Isabel chose that moment to fall out of the tree. Not far, maybe 4 feet, landing with a thump and an outraged cry. They both ran over. She was fine, more offended than hurt, but crying anyway. Rowan picked her up, and Mara watched her daughter's tears dry immediately as she started explaining the physics of tree climbing to her father, complete with gestures and detailed analysis. She's going to change the world, Rowan said. She already is, Mara replied, just by existing the way she does. Free. They went inside together, Mara, Rowan, Isabel, Hannah, who'd arrived for dinner, and sat around the small table in the kitchen. Not a traditional family, not a conventional arrangement, but theirs, built from honesty and failure and the courage to try again differently. And as they ate and talked, and Isabel asked why birds could fly but people couldn't, Mara realized something. She was happy. Not perfectly. Not without complications or lingering scars or moments of doubt, but genuinely, impossibly, surprisingly happy. She'd run from a cage and built a life, changed laws and helped others escape their own cages, raised a daughter who asked questions and climbed trees, and didn't know that women were supposed to be small. And that, all of that, was more than she'd ever imagined possible when she'd stood frozen in that doorway watching her husband with another woman. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was becoming so completely yourself that their opinions stopped mattering, and living so fully that their cage couldn't hold you anymore. That night, after everyone had left and Isabel was asleep, Mara sat in her garden under the stars and thought about everything that had led her here. The pain and fear and desperate choices, the people who'd helped, the ones who'd opposed, the slow, grinding work of change. She thought about the woman she'd been, silent, scared, invisible, and the woman she'd become, loud, brave, undeniably present. They were the same person, but also completely different, and both versions mattered. The broken one who'd found courage, the healed one who helped others find theirs. Tomorrow there would be more work, more women needing help, more systems to fight, more small victories and frustrating setbacks. But tonight, sitting in her garden, in her house, with her daughter sleeping safely upstairs, and her life entirely her own, tonight was enough, more than enough. It was everything.